All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to tonight's special Vision Council Vision Workshop. Sorry, I'm used to saying something else. Please rise with us for a moment of reflection and remain standing for the flag salute.
Yes, please join me in a moment of reflection. We came together tonight to say thank you. Thank you for the privilege, the blessing, the honor it is to serve here in the city of Escondido. We come together as a diverse community, a community of backgrounds, different beliefs, different presents, and different futures, yet one common goal, that is the betterment of this city. We come together today to seek your guidance, wisdom, and discernment during deliberations that transpire this evening, and in doing so, we lift up Mayor White, Deputy Mayor Martinez, Councilmember Christian Garcia, Councilmember Joe Garcia, and Councilmember Judy Fitzgerald. May they be granted peace and wisdom as they lead our city into a bright and prosperous future. Amen.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call this meeting to order. That was loud. And do a quick roll call. Councilmember Fitzgerald.
Present.
Councilman Christian Garcia. Here. Councilman Joe Garcia.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Martinez.
Present.
And I, Mayor White, am present. Do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Just to clarify, so Lisa Richardson, non-agenda. Yes.
See my 3 minutes? Nice. Good evening, Mayor White, City Council members, and fellow Escondido residents. My name is Lisa Richards. I've been a proud resident of Escondido for over 35 years. And as a homeowner, mother who raised her children here, I am deeply invested in our city's future. Recent polls showed that addressing homelessness is a top priority for 76% of Escondido voters, yet only 8% are satisfied with the current response. This mirrors my own concerns, and I'd like to share my perspective and suggestions today. I understand that homelessness is a complex issue, no easy solutions. The diverse needs of the homeless population, coupled with concerns about attracting more individuals from surrounding areas, and the financial costs involved, create significant challenges. Pieces of potential solutions. Reestablish the Escondido Community Advisory Group, include resident advisors, government representatives, and service providers. This group, I feel, can provide valuable insights and community-based solutions. Join the Alliance for Regional Solutions, collaborate with other North City cities and organizations, share resources, data, and expertise to develop effective regional strategies. This partnership could also possibly help manage the influx of homeless individuals from other areas by building up relationships. Learn from successes and failures, research and analyze best practices from other cities, and adapt successful models or pieces of those models to fit Escondido's unique needs and resources. And focus on self-sufficiency. Prioritize programs that empower homeless individuals to become self-sufficient. This may include job training, mental health support, addiction treatment, and affordable housing options. Very, very pleased to know that the subcommittee has recently been put together for homelessness, and hoping big things. I want to thank you for your time and dedication to our city. By working together and leveraging available resources, I believe we can create a more compassionate and effective response to homelessness in Escondido. And I'm committed to supporting these efforts and finding solutions that benefit our entire community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, we have 3 speakers that are specific to the vision. If you want, we can hear them now.
Sure, let's just do them all.
Great. Chuck Samuelson.
Afternoon, all. Mayor, council people, staff. Thanks for letting me speak. When I heard about this visioning session, it struck a chord with me. I'm in the nonprofit sector. I come from a business background, and we do a lot of this sort of exercise, this visioning exercise. And what usually comes out of it is sort of the same thing, more or less. And it's about what your focus is. And if you establish a solid focus on what you're trying to accomplish, what the end goal is, and use that as a lens through which you do your activities and your visioning and your planning and everything else, you usually end up pretty close to where you think you want to be in the end. And so my girlfriend and I have a farm just up the road here, a few minutes away, and we've been talking about, with different city staff, about the project at 455 North Quinn Street here in Escondido, an old mattress factory that's been closed down for many years. And it's a bit of an eyesore. The building leaks, it's been a problem with homelessness on the property, those sort of things. And yet it's such a pearl of an opportunity for economic development, for jobs, for job creation of the kind or economic development of the kind that I think is really critical for this point in time for us. And that's good jobs, yes, but even more so business creation. So the idea that we could have an ag tech accelerator in there to launch new companies, a food maker incubator and accelerator in that project, all things that are under discussion right now, in addition to which, already on site, a food hub for buying and selling of produce from local farmers. And so the two things that I would ask you to keep in mind for this, for a lens or a guiding light or anything else, is the agricultural history of this community, and that it was built by farmers, for farmers. We may have lost a little bit on the way, as most agricultural communities have, but we can get back there with projects like that at Quinn Street, with that sort of development. And so ag and economic development. There are so many things that every city needs, and what you find is that they all cost money, right? They all cost a lot of money. And so having a strong financial sort of pro forma, environment in this city makes so many more things possible. And so again, those two lenses, ag and business development, I would ask you to keep in mind as you move forward with this visioning process. And can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Connie Rascon-Gunther.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mayor, Council members, and all the considerers as well. Just wanted to share a little bit on the visioning aspect of it. I came from industry, aerospace, built a lot of jobs. Vigiladoras know how to create jobs, and I was elected into the sector lead role for California Jobs. And there's funding resources there to help our communities. And so I want to get involved and see how can we use those grants and monies and put together within the plan that they've kind of outlined. And it was our feedback that went into this plan, but where we can really designate where we want to create these jobs. And just talking with the talent of our community here, was known for more arts and culture. And I get involved a lot in Old Town San Diego. I'm part of the chair of descendants of the founding families of California. And so in that collaborative, there's 6 million people that come to Old Town every single year. And we have the talent here to make crafts and all kinds of things that we could be selling in that marketplace. So if we had a vision to somehow put the two cities together to partner up, I think that would be an ideal opportunity for us. There's grant money there for culture and arts as well in the California Jobs Program. So let's have a go at it. Thank you.
Yes,
Mayor, City Council, staff, and guests. I want to commend you for the work that you did in preparing from the last workshop of gaining your priorities of addressing homelessness and attracting houses and jobs, involving the public, improving public safety, maintaining and repairing streets, and keeping public areas clean. And in relation to dealing with homelessness, we need to focus our efforts on housing. So I'd like you to engage in studies around our housing crisis that include determining vacancy rates, average rental rates, existing policies and zoning laws that exist, building codes, any state and federal program feasibility and impact studies, working with local agencies like Interfaith, among others, that contribute to creating these opportunities. I wonder with some of the new housing, such as at the old Palomar Hospital, when the rent rate is at $4,000, that's not affordable housing. And so I'm not sure that we are really capitalizing on the actual needs of the community and the people who actually live here. I'd like to for you to re-examine the library contract and consider the pros and cons of becoming part of the county library system as we're now transitioning and doing some repairs. I'd also like us to really work on saving those community services that those of us who worked so hard on Measure I were looking for ways to give some breathing room. We understand that there's still quite a deficit, but looking for some breathing room to be able to do that. And that can be done through great collaboration efforts. The City of San Marcos does an amazing job of collaborating with their school districts. School districts have a lot of funding right now for after-school enrichment programs, and perhaps we could enter into more joint use agreements with those folks. I believe we should prioritize marketing our city. Just as this woman just said, we have so much to offer, and we have to have a way of getting that out there. So marketing our city is a really important thing. And I'm so pleased to hear about the Arts and Culture Month that we're going to do, and the Indigenous Festival, in addition to all the events that are done by our DBA, our Chamber, Love Esco, and our Escondido Shines community. As I shared in January, I hope that we are all open to diverse voices and ideas. Utilize those of us in the community who are willing to serve. When you do things like this, it's important to have specific and targeted invitations to the people you really need to have at the table. And maybe not in a city council format, but really in a community town hall-esque meeting where those folks who are the leaders of the community, who have the resources to share, can come and have a facilitated discussion to really make that happen. I think it's important that we access the historians as well as the newcomers, the elderly, and especially our youth, because we want those youth to continue to stay in our community and have the roots that I have after being here as a lifelong resident.
I'm sorry, Lily, your time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No further public comments.
All right. We'll move on to the workshop portion, the one and only item on tonight's agenda. And I'll turn the time over to, who is it?
I'm going to start.
Okay.
Welcome, council. First, I want to thank the citizens of Escondido for changing the narrative that we enter this workshop into. Last November, they put their trust in the city and the city's leadership to create a 1-cent sales tax district for the next 20 years. And that gives us an opportunity to start a different conversation tonight about the future of the community. Usually at this point, Councilmember Fitzgerald, you missed some of those. We would have the finance director talking about where we are and how little we have available. This does not solve our structural issue, and you can't solve the structural issue on temporary funding, which this still is, so we still have work to do. But this is an introduction to a new phase, an attempt to capitalize on that trust that the citizens have put into this organization. Just a little bit about the tax measure. The tax actually starts on April 1st. The state has been communicating, it started communicating in February, if not earlier, to our local businesses. We are also going to do an additional communication, even though they own the communication wheels directly on that front since they collect the tax. That means that you're going to start seeing some of that come out starting next week as we push to that April 1 initiation date. We should see proceeds roll into the city starting sometime in the early to mid-summer. Usually they trail by about a quarter. We're currently working, as you all know, on getting a forecast of how much revenue that's likely to bring, and in the budget process we will bring that forecast forward for the council and for the community to understand. As I've talked to you individually in this space, you've seen some of the struggles firsthand that the organization has endured over the last decade plus, probably closer to 20 years. How thin the organization is. I think our per capita average investment in our citizens is the lowest before this tax measure in the county.
But we now have this opportunity to address this, but it is 20 years plus of deferral that we're facing. I want to just point out a couple things before we get into the workshop, and I believe some of this material is available at the table. The last tab in your binder, this is something you haven't seen before. This is the list of deferred maintenance that staff is aware of. If you'll recall, when you were here last year, there was actually an attempt to bring someone on board to do a facilities assessment. The costs we were getting to doing that complete facilities assessment were close to $1 million in itself. But because we've deferred this work, it is now coming due. If there's a cost associated with an item, that's probably because it's closer to its expiration date, or we're really worried that it is going to have a catastrophic failure. That's unfortunately how this organization has operated for a very, very long time. We're not going to get into the details of the list, but this is an example. If I could get direction to include this in the budget as we go through today's workshop, where early wins could be had if staff can come back with proposals. Just for noting, when you review it later, the first 4 pages are about things that will require outside assistance. The second 4 pages are really about things that if we expanded staff capacity, we could start address on a more regular basis. But this is the journey here. You also have the matrix report here, which is the 65 recommendations to address issues in development services. We need time to catch up. So that's one of the appeals that I have, which is to restore organizational capacity to plan, to actually get this back. And so what I'm also looking is for authorization to proceed with this new customer service initiative, which centers on City Hall, where for the next 12 months, for when we initiate the program for 12 months, we close City Hall once a day, and what we work on is improving our customer service, improving our processes, and advancing that. That will create organizational efficiency, because by catching up on both these items, we will start to restore that capacity and our ability to streamline processes, because as you know, many of our processes are 20 years old. So doing that catch-up work is going to be important, and that will provide us the opportunity to stabilize the organization immediately and really be able to move forward, right? So wanted to get that on the table because I think it's a very different place we find ourselves, but we've got to catch the organization up and do the work, as you've heard, that we have not done as a community for 10 to 20 years. And a lot of that's because we didn't have the resource to address these needs. And so that's the positive. We have a chance to do it, but we've got to be really strategic about it and figure out how we restore that capacity in the organization to deliver services and engage with the community. All right.
Were you looking for any direction at this point on that?
I mean, I think you've heard that I've asked for a couple things in terms, and there's a couple other things as we go through the presentation where I'm going to ask to give us some direction. I think as you go through that conversation, as we get through the process, when we come back to the end, I'll be asking for affirmation on those.
Perfect.
Cases.
Okay. So before we jump into the meat of the conversation, I want to review what we are trying to cover today first, and then take just a few minutes to set some group agreements together to ensure that we feel like we are clear on the commitments we're making for how we want to operate together to be most successful. So we want to spend the bulk of our time really digging into defining these key priorities. So we'll spend just a minute looking back at that city vision. We asked you independently, has anything changed, anything you'd want to see updated or revised, or just doesn't feel right anymore? But this is another opportunity to come back to it and to refocus on, a lot is changing in the world very quickly. Anything that feels off base now, given that it's been 6 weeks or so since we've sat down with you individually. Then, once we feel like we are really confident and solid in our vision of long-term success, then we can come back to our more near-term priorities of what does successfully look like in the at the end of 2 years, and walk out of here with a handful of specific priorities that we have consensus on where we think the most important investments are to be made. We also want to have some time to talk about clarity around roles and responsibilities with respect to the Measure I Oversight Committee. So we are not only clear on what the responsibility of that group is, but also the role and responsibility of council and staff in overseeing and implementing Measure I. And then we're going to probably, I would suspect we're going to have just a minute for this, but we want to touch briefly on what are the ways in which communication practices and norms could be improved with council to be more, to facilitate better collaboration and clarity together. And so that's not going to be about workshopping things, but maybe about naming, here are some things that I think we could improve process-wise, or challenges that, policy challenges that exist right now that we could address, and then setting some next steps
So
forward.
let me give a specific example about that. Several council members have asked about space usage, how we start to refine that you as a council member, how you might utilize space or utilize resources to talk to the community, do outreach. I think those are viable options, and we want to support that level of engagement as staff. But today, we probably can't get through the details of it, but getting that idea surfaced, because that might be a perfect thing for an ad hoc subcommittee to work on and bring that back, and then we have guidelines to how we, how council uses space or has access to event resources. Those kinds of things would then create, I think, a much easier flow in the process and get us out of, we were struck without resource, so the answer was globally, no, we can't do that, how are we going to do that? I think there's opportunity to look at something like this, not solve it today, but set up the pathway to get to a future conversation about that.
Thank you. So it's a lot to do in the next, 2.5 hours. So our job, Michael and I, is to make sure that we are staying on track and to help you to gauge when we think a conversation needs to be put in the parking lot for follow-up later, or when we think we really want to dedicate time to it at the expense of potentially something else. That's your decision to make, but it's our job to make sure that you're making it thoughtfully and intentionally. Before we get into our first exercise, which is very brief updates from each of you on how your district, how you see priorities right now existing in your district and then in the city overall, some group agreements. We have spent time before really talking about what do we need to hold each other accountable to be most successful in our work together. Our job today is to land on a handful of priorities so that the city staff have direction for their next steps. So if we want to get that done, what are the things that we need to kind of hold ourselves accountable to? What are the agreements we need to make together? As an example, stay focused on what's in our sphere of control and influence and not get distracted by what's happening in the broader political climate. That's an example that was brought forward in several of your one-on-ones as potentially an agreement we would want to make to be most effective together.
Absolutely.
Question? Councilwoman Garcia.
I know who you are, we know who you are.
I was
Could
just
you
thinking the
introduce
same
yourself
thing.
I didn't want to interrupt, that was a great spiel, but for everybody else in the room, could you guys introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Keith, and I am a consultant that focuses mostly in helping organizations clarify where they want to go, how do they want to get there. So strategic planning, envisioning, and other types of organizational development and leadership development. And
I'm Michael Lindsay, and I'm a psychologist doing organization development and leadership development.
so we've been working with the city for a few years now, off and on, as we're getting clear on the vision, the long-term vision for the city of Escondido, and now what we think our short-term priorities need to be able to best deliver on Measure I in service of that broader vision.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us of that. All right, I'll ask you to, some of us are external processors like me and are just gonna talk this out, but others are not. So take a second independently to think about what are those agreements that we need to commit to. And then I'm just gonna capture them. We won't take a ton of time with that. Sure. All right, whenever you feel ready, there's no like mandatory contribution you need to make, but if there's something that you can see is really important for this group to hold together to be effective in this task that we have set out.
I'll just say, I think we're going to touch on some pretty passionate points for each and every one of us, but for the sake of time and not having to sacrifice too many things at the end of the meeting, if we could stick to keeping our comments to 5 minutes or less each, that would be great.
And when you say comments, like if you're talking about your feelings or your perspective on a particular topic,
correct,
you're not going to take up more than 5 minutes of bandwidth.
Correct.
Does that feel reasonable?
Yes.
Maybe.
Might take us like,
She'll see how she feels about it.
when you get to the end of 5 minutes, you'll let us know.
Yes.
What else?
I would say when we articulate something, sharing, it's an I statement, not a we, so you're speaking for yourself.
Can I add another one?
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure not to interrupt anybody else if they're talking and wait until they're completely finished.
Sean?
Assume good intent.
Yeah, I know we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There may be a diversity of perspectives on how to get to where we're trying to get to, but every one of you I know wants nothing but the best for this city. All right, focus on what we can control and influence, not get too distracted by other things happening in the world. Keep our comments as succinct as possible with a 5-minute time limit. Use I statements, speak for yourself, your own perspective. Take turns speaking and not interrupt one another, and assume good intent.
Anything else?
I'm going to even go so far as to say, if we find ourselves on a multi-minute monologue, we're probably not taking best advantage of the opportunity for real dialogue that we have today. So that might sometimes be needed. You have a lot to get out and to share, but we also want to be in dialogue together rather than just taking turns speaking. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So piggybacking off that, also stay focused on the topic that we're talking about. Don't go on diatribes or anything like that, but stay focused on the bullet point that we're making. Yeah.
And if you have something that comes up for you where you're like, this is something we got to talk about, I don't want to forget it, we are happy to make a parking lot of conversations that need to happen and pass those on to city staff to get agendized.
So would stay focused on the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Capture what you're saying.
I have a question regarding community participation.
as we're discussing something, if someone in the community wants to ask a question of clarity or make a comment, how are we going to be dealing with that? And I know that falls on you, sorry.
I'm open to suggestions from the rest of the group.
I know it's a tough one, I get it, but.
I would say not 3 minutes. We're not going to do
No.
3-minute comments for each item, but if there is a relatively quick question that we can reasonably answer, then
30 seconds?
yeah, exactly, in like a 30-second time frame.
Well, I think it's important then to state that this is not about solving or solving an issue, if
Yeah.
that's going to be coupled. So it's not about, it's about identifying where you want to go, right? And so that we can develop a work plan to meet that. It's not about solving the issue at hand, right? So it's about the work plan development. So if we can agree to that, then it may become easier to manage that, because it's not, we're not making a decision
Right.
about topics
Right.
tonight. I'm going to be asking for some direction at the end, but most of this is going to be on a process of where you want to go and how do we develop that work plan,
So
right?
to that end, if there are things that the community, is aware of that are possible solutions or possible resources, are there places that we can capture those things for use in the future?
He's right there.
Yeah, that there's a line of communication open with the clerk in order to address those things, or put them on our plate, so to speak, for discussion.
So it's not necessarily something related to the priorities themselves, but it's more, oh, I have an idea, given we made that priority for a way that we might deliver on that, or I know of this resource over there, then Mr. Beck would be your conduit.
Yeah, and I'll put my email up somewhere so you can email me directly, and even my phone number if you want to text me in the middle of the meeting. Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect.
So could we summarize that as welcome public input on desired goals, 30-second limit?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I would just to be crystal clear, the agreements stand for the whole room, not just city council.
But I would think, Mayor, you would want to reserve the right, if you've gone too far afield, to bring it back to perhaps
Yeah, that
less
goes
of that.
both
depending-
groups,
Yeah.
us and them.
Yeah.
We'll continue to adjust as we need to. Thank you, Michael. All right, so we originally had a much bigger chunk of time for kind of grounding in our current state than we do now in this compressed agenda. So that's why a lot of your binder materials, exist in front of you. There's a lot of really good current state information in there that we can reference throughout this conversation. To start with, we would like to hear a brief, maybe even less than 5 minutes if possible, just a brief snapshot of how, from your district standpoint, you're seeing the priorities in the city and how you're seeing the priorities of the city overall. So what we don't want to do is silo ourselves in our individual districts as if we're pitted against one another, but you are most in touch, probably, with the priorities of your district. So making that available to everyone is helpful. And then also lending your perspective on overall, as an overarching city together, how do you see the priorities right now? We asked you this individually. I have a little bit of a synthesis to show you, but this is your chance to speak more as you as council member to your fellow council members, not just to me.
I'll go first if you guys want. Yeah, so spent quite a bit of time in the community talking about this over the last several months, and it's interesting listening to the public speakers because they reflect the things that I hear most often and the things that I came in mind with today, and that is setting some direction around homelessness with the additional resources we will have, what we can do concerning public safety, arts and culture, and economic development.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go next, just keep it down. That's exactly the same thing. I mean, what the mayor just said, what everybody else here said, I think there is the priority of public safety and homelessness. I should separate those. There should be priority of homelessness, I think needs to be addressed. And even though we've been very assertive, very aggressive the last year, I think people still want to see more, which I think we are planning to do. And also be very holistic about it, and really understand there's not a one size fits all, or there's not, you know, one solution for everything. It's going to be multifaceted. There is the idea of public safety. Public safety, I think, has been a really big concern, especially when we're talking about traffic safety. Traffic safety, surprisingly, has been a very big concern that I've been hearing quite a bit. I say surprisingly because given everything else, it's one of the ones that are on top of the list. Business development is absolutely huge, and I know that we've been talking about that. I think what's the business community is really asking for streamlining processes, making things more efficient, making things more concise. Marketing, I think, is a huge thing that's been asked for because people internally are doing what they can to support local businesses, but we need to market outside the city. And I think public safety. Oh, and really capitalizing or being opportunistic on the opportunities that we have here, which are arts, culture, and I think a scene that isn't really, we haven't really tapped into its full potential. So that is right.
Are we going to sit order?
Sure.
Did you have a slide that captured what we had said, or?
I do. Do you want to see it?
That would be great, yeah, just to refresh. Great. And this is all of ours?
This is everyone all together. So
Got it.
at the top are just kind of the groupings of what you spoke to. At the bottom are the 2023 priorities that you set as council,
okay.
just so you can kind of see how they line up.
Awesome, okay, great. Yeah, so for District 1, and I think just the city overall, but things that I hear a lot from my constituents are housing and homelessness, having, being able to support our folks who are facing, homelessness issues. Affordable housing is a huge one that I hear, as well as like the kind of older units that are lots of rent hikes. So there's been a lot of, especially since COVID, there's been a lot of newly acquired properties. So they're and so they've been flipping these properties. Blackstone has several properties in my district, and so that means they make them look nice, but the rents go up, and then someone that maybe had like 2 parking spots is now being given 1 parking spot and being charged for the extra, and that sends people out into the neighborhoods that take up parking spaces, so lack of parking as well. So I would say that constantly I'm asking, why don't we build more affordable? Why don't we have affordability in new developments, so like inclusionary housing, protecting renters and protecting the older housing stock that is naturally affordable. Traffic safety, we have a lot of hit and runs in our city, and it's just really heartbreaking because I hear about people on bikes or walking that get hit. We don't have a lot of funding for safe routes to school, so people don't feel safe having their kids walk to school, so that's why we have more traffic, because people want to take their kids to school. There's also just public safety, as far as like we heard an incident recently about a girl who was almost kidnapped, so people just don't feel safe having their kids walk to school. Lots of red light runners in our city, lots of speeding and racing. That is a constant that I'm hearing. So traffic safety and just the outdated signalization and kind of backup that happens around certain traffic safety signals and intersections. And I know one intersection that will be coming online this year, 3 years, it was a 3-year waiting process, and kind of communicating that to the residents is really challenging. So communication, I think also youth, youth, there's been a lot more increasing youth violence, so having more opportunities for youth, and also opportunities for recreation and families, maintenance of our parks. We don't have like an actual fund or staffing to actually maintain our parks and keep them clean. So that's what I mainly hear about: affordability, resources for our communities, safety around traffic, street, and affordable meeting space for people, community, and organizations, as well as resiliency, mitigating the resiliency of heat during the summer months, because we have really high temperatures. That's all for now. Thank you.
So I actually pulled out my phone to put my 5-minute limit on here, but I noticed that it's over there. So I'll just chime in. I don't need to repeat a lot. Homelessness, definitely, no, this is my district. Homelessness, speeding, road safety. I just made a quick list. Potholes, speed bumps, as something that's come up a number of times. Signage is an issue that I haven't heard that we talk about to help bring awareness of speed, et cetera, et cetera. School routes is something else.
Can I ask, when you say signage, can you give me more specific, Councilman?
Well, I can do one very personal to me. When I come out of where I live and I make a left turn, there's a right turn that would be very nice if people had to make a stop rather than just keep on going. And where I live, there's at least 500 cars that are coming out at the same time going to the high school, going to, to work everywhere. So we have near collisions all the time there. So signage, maybe protected left turns, or just a simple sign, no left turn while there's, when the light's red, things like that. I've heard from residents in my district off of Country Club that there's very little signage on speeding and things like that, and they would like more reminders.
I got it.
Okay. In my district, one of the big things is, can you please finish Country Club? That's not happening. And that is, I think, something that is impacting the entire city. I recently had a walkthrough, and I think that it's something that we definitely need to be looking at, because it's been years. We're not talking 6 months, 1 year. We're talking years of waiting for this to happen. That's in my district. The park recreation, after-school programs, family recreation. Now, when it comes to city, well, obviously homelessness, public safety, fire, police, public works, streets, potholes, things like that. One of the big things that I think that has become visible is infrastructure. Today, we're dealing with another broken pipe on Rose and East Valley. So I think that's something that we need to, as a city, look at. Our parks, when we're talking about housing, I think that affordability is something that's very important, but both for sale and rental, not just rental, but for sale and rental. I think it's something that we need to look at. So economic development, obviously, so that is, I can put that out there.
All right, well, in my district, in terms of what I've seen, and also the public outreach, what they've said, traffic safety, again, is an issue, especially in the areas where there's been many apartments that have been developed, but the traffic lights and the signals remain the same, and so it's not pedestrian friendly in those areas where the people are trying to raise their families, and we're trying to attract those families. So paying attention to that. With businesses and attainable housing, I hear affordable housing, but I'm also thinking of attainable housing in creating, which is why I like what you were saying as far as the work culture and working on that. Creating a culture here in the city where we can get to a yes, to help with development, to help bring attainable housing for first-time home buyers so they can start creating generational wealth, or that can be their forever home. But people, especially, we have a big demographic that really are being outpriced. They're not real low income, but they can't afford the higher ones. So again, being able to work with bringing in developers to, get, workforce for the attainable housing. Street maintenance, there's a lot of issues with some streets are good, but we are ignoring a lot of those streets that we don't drive by because they're just in those neighborhoods that are tucked in, but I've been driving by and it's shameful. So I'm glad that hopefully we'll be able to get them involved, be able to fix that. So, and businesses, I think again, that's going to get back to the work culture, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to get that, so that's very hopeful. Again, the priorities as they're up there, you know, public safety for both police and fire and public works, because they do go hand in hand. With public safety, I'm just coming from the perspective of having been in law enforcement and what that looks like, and then also kind of being familiar and kind of really researching what's going on with our department here, is really being able to go in there and offer or look at ways where we can attract higher quality lateral officers. And also, you know, what is it that we could do to attract quality officers to stay long-term? Not entry-level officers that we have to train that the majority end up leaving, because I found that out as well, you know, for whatever reasons, and we're not attracting laterals. So in comparison to other cities, as far as the research that I did, I see why. And the really good thing about our department is it has an excellent work culture. They really support each other and they work with what they have, but we're really not equipping them the way we should. We're in the 21st century, folks. And regarding the, oh gosh, what are they called, those cameras?
Clock.
There's,
cameras.
yes, those cameras. We have one, maybe two in our whole city. And other departments have 100. Departments smaller than our size have more. And so going back to public safety, you know, that kidnap attempt, that made me think about the cameras, that kidnap attempt. To be able to have captured a license plate of that vehicle, we would have caught that person in an hour. What if that person had decided that, well, he's not finished with the hunt and decided to go hunt someone else between that time span that it took us to figure out who he was? And then also the fatal accident of that 13-year-old Angel. It was a busy intersection. It's 6 months and it's still unsolved. How can we give closure to the family? It could have been, you know, let's just have a camera that captures only the license plate for a start. It's not intrusive. We're not going to be identifying anybody, but it's really going to streamline the process. So again, you know, we talk public safety and security, and my thing is, I'm going to be saying it over and over, our logo is Escondido City of Choice. What makes a city of choice? Because we provide a safe environment, and then we're going to attract the right businesses and the right developments. So I'm really passionate about being able to give public services, police and fire, what they need in order to offer a better package for officers that'll come and stay long-term versus just a foot-in-the-door agency, stay here for 5 years, and then go find a job somewhere else. And I think that's about it, but I really am very supportive of the deferred maintenance. I think it's important, and I think it's something that we'd be able to show right away. And then the work culture here.
I don't mean to interrupt
I
you, but
appreciate-
we've reached the 5 minutes.
Oh, I thought I had
How do
4
you feel
seconds
about
left.
it?
I thought I had 4 seconds left. Counting backwards. Thank you.
Wonderful. So as I'm listening to you and I'm looking at kind of this reflection of the conversation you had with Michael and I about your priorities, lots of alignment still, which is not surprising, but a few things that I don't feel like are captured there. So you guys chime in if you also are seeing things, but I'm not seeing as much about street maintenance. I don't think that was brought up prior, and so that's not reflected here. Similarly, I don't think that affordable, attainable housing is reflected up here. But other than that, I think we've hit on most of the things that are captured. So if you haven't had a chance to look at this, you know, as the colleagues have been talking, I'm curious, having just heard what you heard, how well do these 5 kind of big overarching priorities, how well do those fit with what you see and have heard about the needs of the city? Recognizing that there are some things that we have just made are not listed yet.
It obviously does not include every topic that we hit or that the public would like to see, but to me, this reflects pretty well what the priorities are.
Great. 80 to 90% of it that we covered is already up there.
One thing I don't see is communication, but I don't know if that would fall under organizational capacity. But I just, one thing that I think is really important, and I forgot to mention in my list, is just communication of what we're doing, because we are making progress, and I feel like
I see it.
we don't.
The financial stewardship, that might not be the best.
Third bullet under financial stewardship.
Oh, good, okay, because I was like, I know I mentioned it, but yeah, I would just say that's really important, because that is so key, especially now with Measure I, right? It's gonna be really important that we're sharing the stories and the impact of that sales tax measure passing, and the positive impact that it's going to have on our city. We need to be very intentional, I think, about communicating that, so that they can see, hey, my tax dollars are at work in a good way,
Yes. Agreed.
I think for me, in public safety and security, those are all good. But I'd like to see more as far as supporting and equipping both fire and safety, but public works is also a big component in safety. That should be added.
I thought I saw something about them somewhere.
That could kind of be interpreted of what's under organizational capacity.
Yeah, maybe we just add their name and their public works.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're central to that and the public safety
Yeah.
and security. They're part of both.
So if we feel generally good about these big areas, here's what I'm thinking, and I'm open to feedback, but I'm thinking that maybe we spend some time really digging into these in small groups first, so that we can get a lot of stuff out. And then we can come back together and look at the work that we've done, and we really focus on what do we want to see different in the city in 24 months in these areas, and why. Because if we take, for example, we want to see more flock cameras everywhere, we also want to say why, because the city staff might say, okay, we can't get, 24 flock cameras up in the next 2 years, but because we know why you want them, we think we can prioritize putting them at these high-risk intersections, and maybe that's a way to kind of give you what you're looking for. So the why is important for the city staff as they're going back and kind of ground truthing this with what can be accomplished. How does that sound?
Great.
How would the groups work?
The groups would work like this. They could work like this. We could break into 2 groups, one group of 3, one group of 2. The group of 3 could tackle 3 priorities. The group of 2 could tackle 2 priorities. Flesh out what you can, and then we'll come back together and get eyes on each other's work and refine, have debates if we need to about, maybe what shouldn't be on there or what we would add, to come to some consensus around what we would want to see at the end of 24 months and why we think that's important, or what we think that would accomplish.
One thing I just to say, if we're going to do that, for Brown Act purposes, the group of 3 would need to stay in this room, and the public would need to hear their dialogue. A group of 2 could be in a separate room, effectively, an ad hoc subcommittee temporarily for this meeting, and they're going to closed session. But we could have it where the public needs to hear a majority of the discussion, the majority of the council's discussion.
An alternative would be we do all 5 all together.
Kind of, I feel like we kind of did that before, right, in the past? Like we kind of said our thing and we get it captured on the sheet, and then we can look at it in real time? We've done it that way in the past.
We have done it that way.
What are you done? I'm sorry.
Well, I like the idea of doing it all together.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Me too.
So we can see in real time and feed off each other's energy.
So what, I like that too. My only concern is timing, right? We've got a lot of grounds to cover, but if we stay pretty focused and we allocate maybe a certain amount of time per, then we don't run the risk of getting, having the few at the end not get any attention at all.
Yeah, I think with our awesome facilitators, you can make sure we're keeping on track.
How much time would be each, 5 minutes, 3 minutes?
We could do more than 5 minutes. We could do 7 minutes per. and still have time, I think, for refinements.
Okay.
Before we do that, just one final reminder, particularly for the community, of this kind of vision for the city together, of a safe and secure community with inclusive living, it's a business incubator, an arts and culture hub, and with, beautiful outdoor recreation, open space amenities for citizens. Lots of other details in there. And you all have this, but just a reminder and a quick, speak now or hold your peace if anything feels off base.
This is based on the new? Or
This is
previous?
all your
Got it.
previous work.
Okay, that's it.
Question, the business incubator, is that tied to any schools or is that city?
It's not exclusive of schools.
Yeah, I recall that conversation being about innovative ways to support business. So, that could fit.
That was a lot about ag tech and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the discussion around that.
So city manager has a question about number 4. It says specifically outdoor recreation and open spaces. Is that, when we say outdoor recreation and open spaces, what about indoor facilities that promote those?
So maybe it's unnecessarily exclusive of indoor recreation spaces.
It's a question I ask, right? Because it seems
for
to suggest,
sports, yeah,
it seems that it does, it's not inclusive of other types of recreational opportunities that might not be outdoors.
Like futsal can be indoors.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And there's a lot of requests for that.
And it's not even listed.
It's very specific, and that's why I'm asking the question, is that still how you want to define your priority, or do you want to be more expansive in that space to also include recreation opportunities beyond just beyond outdoor recreation?
So that could be a very easy update of just
I would-
removing
I would-
outdoor.
Outdoor, yeah.
I would
I like
support
it.
that.
Yeah.
I think we should do that.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where we're going, I'd like to talk about, again, what you would like to see different in this category in 24 months, why, right, what that's trying to accomplish. And then before we finish, I also want to have a conversation about what are the big risks or threats, things that could happen in the external environment that could derail that, because that's also going to be helpful for staff as we're thinking about priorities. We don't get to that part completely today. I think that's okay, but I think that a lot of the priorities are going to be dictated not just by what you want to see done, but about what kinds of things could derail it.
And as a follow-up, right, this is part of a process. You all are going to say what you want to see done, and now I have to go back and figure out what can actually be done, or what resources can be added to get that done, right? So this is an iterative process, just so the public understands, the council understands that we're not talking about what obstacles, how long it takes to procure something, what staffing is needed. We're trying to get to an ideal outcome in these spaces in 24 months, or what we would like to see, and then we'll have to measure that against what we have ability to do, because there are always limitations in that space. So that's just for the general statement.
So you're just looking for us to point out what's missing at this point?
Yeah, so right now what we have said, yeah, we want to address homelessness. I think getting as specific as we can would be helpful, right? What does that look like at the end of 24 months?
Perfect. I think Councilman Garcia touched on this earlier concerning policy. We've done great in the policy realm, but I think the next step that we need to pursue is a homeless shelter.
And why?
You know, people, I think the community appreciates the policy, but they judge with their eyes. I think we all judge with our eyes. And, you know, with respect to homelessness, what people want to see is fewer homeless people on the streets and being provided services in a safe, productive area. And it's really just the next step in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll keep going on one more for public safety. With respect to traffic safety, but specifically a couple of things that I have noticed and that have been brought to my attention is crosswalk safety and specifically traffic around school buses.
Mm. So what would you like to see different around crosswalk safety and school bus safety?
You know, it's really twofold. I don't know if an education or enforcement campaign where we just have, you know, officers parked there, educating people, writing tickets, whatever the case may be, but also if there is a way to actually improve the crosswalks, in particular with the Escondido Creek Trail, which I know were just done, but in some cases, the little flashing lights are not enough to keep people safe.
And the why there is, you think you need more education and enforcement around crosswalks and school buses because you would like to reduce the number of
We'd like to prevent any accidents.
casualties.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And question on the traffic, is it because people ignore the flashing lights?
On the crosswalk?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see it all the time,
Absolutely.
especially by the senior center. That's
So
the
Broadway,
worst one.
Broadway, right there, and the Creek Trail, yes. I would love to do this citywide, but those are probably the
Yeah.
most critical ones to be done and addressed first.
I've seen it on Citrus, the light's the same thing, and
Yeah.
that's a very small street, and it has the same problem.
You're talking about the Creek Trail?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically east of City Hall.
I think people are pretty unfamiliar with how those function. They see a flashing yellow light and they kind of slow down and then they go through it anyway. Just because I don't think they really, so maybe an education
Well,
campaign.
we could put education by putting a motor cop there, and he can give out warnings, but.
So we're starting to
The-
get
the
in, we're starting to get
particulars
into
are for the
solution.
city manager.
So I'm gonna
But
remind us
why?
to get out of the
Why?
solution space and get back to the.
We also had a public comment.
Yes.
Oh, I would like to see a lit crosswalk at Second and Calmia, connecting the old Escondido community to downtown.
So again, we're talking conceptually, so I'm gonna bring it back up to the conceptual level. And then what we want to see is the outcome.
And I think in particular with other areas, that can be addressed through general plan updates, specific plan updates and things like that.
There's a lot, that's what I'm saying, there's interworking parts, so as we figure out where those are going to be addressed, right? And there may be some prioritization that needs to happen later, but for this purpose, I think we need to lift the conversation.
Yeah. What else do you want to see different in 2 years around public safety?
What I brought up in the past and what my colleague just brought up earlier is block cameras. So I think, you know, going with traffic safety, but I think, I don't want to say surveillance because it has a negative connotation, but better methodologies of I don't know, to do investigations or something.
I think, sorry, were you done?
That's it.
To go along with that would be to address the policy around public surveillance cameras.
Surveillance might be.
Yeah, needing policy around that.
I think with public safety too, I'd like to see the police department, the number of officers, get them up to what the per capita median is, because we're below that.
And why?
Sorry.
Why? So we can take a more proactive approach to crime prevention versus just going from call to call and equipping the units that had to be dismantled because of not enough officers to fill those spots.
I know that's not directly listed under public safety, but a number 4, I believe, is for the entire organization, which does encompass
Okay.
public safety. So it's improve recruitment and retention, staff open key areas. It does say police.
Mhm. I would like to see, so with there's a lot of red light runners, and I know at one point we used to have red light cameras and it just became cost prohibitive and labor intensive for the police department, so it's not something that they find to be very helpful. But the community is very frustrated, and I get frustrated, like I literally wait 2 to 3 seconds before I even enter an intersection. There was it's some type of device, and it's not the cameras, but it's one thing that I did hear from the former chief of police is that it's like the proof that someone ran a red light. There has to be something showing that they actually ran a red light, and there's like a really inexpensive device that can be put on the intersections. But I think really having, I really love when our police department does operations throughout the city, because they show, like today we ticketed 5 people who went like 20 miles above the speed limit. I mean, it's insane how fast they go. But I feel like more of those operations throughout the city at random times, at busy intersections, because then people will be like, oh, who knows when the traffic enforcement is going to be out there? I don't know where they're going to be today. I don't know what time they're going to be. I feel like more of that, because the sentiment that I do get is, sometimes it's done in front of an officer and nothing happens to the person. So the why is really to improve driving in Escondido and to hold people accountable for violating our traffic safety laws and to prevent accidents and deaths. And create a culture of better driving in Escondido. We need to change the culture, because we have an infamous, reputation for that.
Can he get 15 seconds? He didn't get any time.
I feel left out.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would piggyback on the school bus, because we mentioned it, but we haven't fleshed anything out regarding that. And I think that's a big deal, because I have kids all over the place that I see, and nobody remembers what the law is. If the little stop, what does that mean? If there's 2, whatever. So I think education is a big deal. The police department has done some great education out there, but I think that's something that we need to definitely work on.
And Mr. Mayor, the time has expired on this item. We did receive one public comment for a request for 30 seconds to speak about bicycle pedestrian safety or bike improvements, if you'd like that to come forward.
Sure.
Tracy.
Hi everyone, thanks for the 30 seconds. I just wanted to add my vote for improvements to bicycle lanes around the city, both for the safety of the cyclists, but also for our climate action goals. It would be a lot easier to reduce our emissions if it were safe to drive around town. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. So, for the sake of time moving for the other 4 areas, what if we set the timer for 1 minute for each council member? That's 5 minutes, and then if anybody has anything else they'd like to add quickly at the end or in the last 2 minutes.
I like it.
That way we're not giving Joe 15 seconds.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and also.
I would say there's a decision made around the trade-off in terms
Yeah.
of the interactivity that you can have if you don't do that way.
Let's try it for the next one.
Yep, and I would encourage us to use that last few minutes for that purpose, right? To say, actually, I think this is more priority, or I see it differently, whatever.
And I was going to ask a question, because I know that public safety is a big one, and I feel like 7 minutes is not enough time for that one. If the others, maybe we don't take as much time, maybe we can come back to that one?
Yes. I also couldn't come up with a better header than business friendly, but we can work on it. All right, should we go in reverse order? At the end of 24 months, what would you want to see in terms of being more business friendly?
You're up to bat, sir.
All right, so what I would say, we definitely need to streamline the processes, but I think that needs to be staff-led. I think staff are the ones that are in the middle of knowing how it works and stuff, so it needs to be staff-led, streamlined processes. I think we do need to invest a little on that. Why? Because when we do that, it'll provide us an opportunity to be able to respond to the needs of housing, of permits, of whatever, all those things. So I think that that's something that's very, very important. General plan, oh, definitely, we need to update that. I don't know if I need to say why, other than it's super old. Business friendly. I would say we need to create a culture in which our businesses feel supported, answered, and taken care of, because that is money for us. I'm sorry, that was a terrible way of ending, but revenue for the city.
Great.
I think what's important is making sure that we do make it a priority to make sure that the general plan and the zoning end up lining up to where we can start being more business and development friendly. Also, the staff-led training, creating that new culture that you were speaking of. You know, I'd like to see the customer service part of it being, if it's a big plan, having that one point of contact to take out the frustration of that person coming and talking to 5 individuals with 5 different answers. So a concierge of sorts, also giving them a time frame of how much time they have to either to approve it, whatever it is, a plan, so it's a priority, and also however many times they have to send it back to the person, so they can make sure that the review's more thorough, they complete it in a timely manner, and so we're more friendly to businesses and developments.
So reduce frustration, I'm just thinking about, if we're kind of talking about the why.
Mm-hmm.
It's increased revenue.
And it'll attract business.
Yep.
Attract
more businesses.
Yes. And development. If we don't frustrate them.
Okay, so I support what my colleagues have said and everything that's up on that. I feel we have a very unique opportunity with the Ag Tech Food Hub in Escondido with our agricultural roots to be a model and inspiration for our city. It's super important now more than ever, as well as, you know, navigating development services. I think a lot of people, had they known in advance, they could prepare for unexpected expenses, such as this grease trap or something, grease trap, that many restaurants and coffee shops kind of get surprised and dinged for $15,000. So having a navigator at the front counter, that if someone comes in and doesn't even know where to start, that navigator can help them know, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so, or oh, this is the next step. Someone that, a go-to person that answers their phone calls, that is a face that they can connect with. And just visiting our businesses, thanking them for being part of our city and showing them that we value them.
What would it, at the end of 24 months, what would you want to see around ag tech or supporting farmers?
Yeah, so that the building that the feasibility study is in, that it's actually active and fully at capacity.
That's the
with businesses and farmers.
North.
Yes, that it's up and running, so it's by that time, even before that time, but yeah.
And why does ag tech in particular feel important?
It's because of our agricultural roots. And it's also a big need in the region that not a lot of municipalities are focusing on. But we all need to eat, and we have like the perfect climate. So it's a great economic development opportunity. And we are, San Diego County is has the most, small farms in the country, the most organic farms in the country. So we have a unique opportunity and role that we can play, in our region.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And city.
That's good.
I don't want to add too much more than what's already here, because these things are already super important. We need to streamline the process. It's the one thing I hear most from any business. We obviously the general plan update, and and the agricultural, the ag tech, and the support farmers, of course. You know, I think we could be the leaders in the industry. The only thing that I think I would want to add to that is that maybe this is a role for city council and the mayors, you know, more communication and input from business owners. And I know we already do that when we, you know, I go to the DBA meetings, for example, but just that constant flow of communication both ways, getting input from businesses and then also explaining to businesses what the city's doing. And then we need to be a little bit more proactive with communicating, with helping our businesses market. That's it. That's it? That's it?
Is there time for comments?
Okay. Just one second. Speaking to the previous two public comments about the crosswalk and the bike lanes, both great things, and an update to our general plan, which is the roadmap for the entire city, would address that, you know, throughout the entire city. So I'm very supportive of that. You know, utilizing the housing subcommittee. I know that's sort of specific to housing, but it goes right along with the general plan update and, you know, the growth of the city. And two more things.
Okay, can you tell me more about what do you want to see with that housing subcommittee?
We've had talk about affordable housing, the type of housing that comes to the city. I guess whatever policy and procedure that goes along with that, the housing subcommittee can address.
So you'd like to see them develop a policy or procedure around
and
affordable or attainable housing?
use it to clean up some of the other smaller issues with the city's zoning code and things like that, which does pertain to business. I think Deputy Mayor Martinez mentioned promoting ourselves. Having policy around the city's social media and how it's used and things that the council wants to see put out into the public is a way to brand ourselves on the internet and attract people and businesses to come to the city. And along with that, how about a rebrand of the city? I don't know when that flag was made, and City of Choice. Like, if people want it, that's fine. But let's update it and modernize and have a beautiful flag and a great motto, and let's
City of preference.
Bring it up to today.
City of preference, is that what you said?
With the goal,
You know, how do we view ourselves? How do we want everybody else to view the city of Escondido?
Like branding.
Yeah, exactly, branding.
with the goal of really reflecting outward how you see yourselves and attracting more people to want to be a part of the city.
Exactly.
We talked about that a lot last time, but we just didn't have enough time to be able to get around to it.
I don't think we had the resources to do it
Yeah,
either.
exactly, and I think this time we do.
We'll ask for community input, what they'd like to see. Have them submit.
And tell me a little bit more about what else you would, like, why general plan update?
That's for the next one. Why a general plan update? It's outdated, it doesn't reflect modern society.
It's outdated.
It is
Yeah.
a
insufficient.
The roadmap to the city points straight to the 80s.
There are so many things on that.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally, it is the direction you want to see the community grow and develop, and it is out of synchronization with where the council wants to go.
We have to
And
evolve.
so it isn't, it sits in opposition to lots of the goals that are on this list.
And for the sake of time, I would encourage not going down that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The list is too long, the whys are too long.
It's outdated.
So we all agree on that.
Mayor, we do have two public comments.
Let's go ahead and move to public
So
comment.
Sabrina Covington and then Tracy Barham.
For business friendly, I'd like to see more mid and large size businesses come to Escondido that we see in all over the San Diego County. And the reason being they're using our median household income as an excuse not to develop. And we need to get our way out of that.
And Tracy.
Regarding the general plan update, I just wanted to point out that there are several different areas up here that all fall into the climate action plan. I'm looking at the energy plan, and number 5, the bike lanes that I just mentioned are community spaces, biodiversity, and ecosystems. And so I just want to advocate for having a single person whose responsibility it is to drive the climate action plan forward, because sustainability is transdisciplinary, and if everybody is in their silos, it's unlikely to connect all of those pieces. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've each said our piece. Anything that you want to discuss further around business friendly, where you think actually that's going to head us down the wrong path, or I don't think that's a priority, right? The goal here is to give the staff a concrete set of priorities to start to build around and bring something back to you. So you want to make sure you're good.
We've given them more than they can chew already.
Well, so the city manager's got 2 questions.
Okay.
So if we go back to 2023, there were 2 assignments given to staff that are, we started to explore, but they ended up not going further. And I think they fit most appropriately in this category. One was trying to figure out what we wanted to do around Prop S.
Oh, that's right.
Because the council had given a direction to pursue repeal of Prop S. That the state was not interested in taking that on, and nor was the community survey representing that there was a plurality that would support making it an easy question. That in itself is that requires incredible education resources, because it is about land use. So it's a very difficult thing. One of the potentials is to start to deal with that issue, at least from the city side, during the general plan process. You tackle it as you take your elements and you figure out what you need to take to the voters and not to voters, because so it could be put into that process. Although we said we want it in 24 months, we know general plan update is going to go beyond the 24 months. We've already had some of those discussions, but we need to get started now. So my question is the council comfortable with that? Because that was an assignment, repeal Prop S, placing that into the sphere that goes with the general plan conversation.
I think that the effects of that have been brought to my attention so often over the last 2 years that I believe it's worth exploring.
Now?
Yes.
Okay, so I will just say that is an incredibly, when I get to talking through budget and capacity, that requires a lot of community engagement and education, so that will tie up a significant amount of resources to put it on the agenda now. I'm not saying it's impossible, because that is going to be an education component, right? Because you're going to have to sit down, have directed conversations. That's clear from the process. So we can have that conversation. I just wanted to test this. And so if you want to have the conversation about what it's going to take, that's what it's going to take.
I think it's worth exploring.
Okay.
And I have a clarification on that. So when you're saying that, Mayor, do you mean like as part of the general plan, or is that separate?
No, you would. Mike and I have talked about a process under which you could start to tackle issues around Prop S in your general plan process, yes, and tie it to the general plan process.
Yeah.
But the assignment was different. The assignment was, how do we address this, get it repealed? We looked at a variety of ways, including taking it to the voters, where there was not a significant representation in the polling, and the advice was you had to do a lot of education. So we could go back to somebody in that realm and say, what would that take? What would that look like? So we could get that conversation in front of us. But I also don't want to leave the second component out, because it's another one that was an assignment, which was to look at pursuing a cannabis tax, which is also, I believe, fits into I would put it in the, for lack of a better term, business friendly, because you're trying to create an environment. That again is another significant planning process, right? I'm already dealing, I mean, I'm gonna tell council flat out, as I've told you each one-on-one, we need to fix it before we start doing new stuff. But if there's a desire to pursue that, we need to talk about that. Not maybe solve that today, but those are two heavy lift items that I need some direction about where we're gonna go next in that conversation.
Can you combine, would it be possible to, I think both are important, yeah, I noticed that we didn't mention them, but is it possible to, I guess I'm trying to figure out like where that, you know, if that, we're having to exchange things off that list to have that conversation.
I'd like to know what we would be replacing with that time.
Yeah.
Right, and again, that's the direction I'm looking for, is what is that gonna look like, what is it gonna cost, and what is the resource allocation?
What is the why for exploring repealing Prop X? What is that supposed to accomplish?
Brings more housing to the city, gives us more housing opportunities.
It eliminates limitations
Barriers.
on the ability to.
Yeah.
It actually, and it would also speed up your general plan process, because you would not have to take the general plan.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I'll just say like, I'm very open to the conversation. I think for me, it's just because I do know that didn't do well in the polling, and it seems like a very huge lift and so much resources, so I'm also mindful of like derailing other things for that, because I almost see that as very, very out there. Like I feel like that's a long-term conversation. We should have it, but I feel like the results of that could be 10 years away or something.
So it could be a really big lift, but not a lot of impact in the near term.
Exactly.
Is it possible, because it sounds like we're saying this, similar things. Is it possible to see, okay, here's what we would do in the next 2 years without these on our agenda, and what it would look like with them on our agenda?
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get, that's why I wanted to flag them,
Yeah.
is because they were not, I don't see them in the discussion, and they were remnants from the last conversation.
I think it's worth putting on the list and exploring.
That's
For both.
For both.
Scenario
Correct.
A, scenario B.
Because they're still important, and we still hear about them.
And the cannabis tax is about revenue generation. That's the why.
That's part of it.
And creating a pathway for those businesses to actually operate within.
In the bounds of the law.
There's a business
Well, there's-
ordinance that allows you.
Taking it from the underground to the above ground. Because people are still,
And
buying it.
Isn't that already coming to us in a staff report? Cannabis?
Because of all of our departures and our changes and where we were, it's stagnant right now. And because
But
it
we
was-
did give direction.
It has been put.
But that's why I'm bringing it forward, because it's not, there are other things that have not moved forward either, such as the sign ordinance revision, right? All these things impact each other, right? And so I wanted to put it out there so we didn't miss it. I'm assuming that those were important and we wanted to have conversation about them, but they weren't present in our discussion right now.
They hadn't come up yet.
Yeah.
Just clarifying real quick for the audience, this is not a decision whether or not to pursue those two things right this second. I heard some voices for a minute. It's not a decision to pursue either one right this second. It is a question of whether or not we want to pursue them in the future.
Could I add one other part, at least with respect to Prop S? It sounds like there's consensus that that's something you're interested in. Would the council be equally interested in seeing if there are community development, business, outside parties that would be interested in taking on that burden?
If it took the burden off the city,
Right.
absolutely.
That's what I figured, but I
Yes.
just make sure that you would all be comfortable with an exploration if there's a third party interested in that.
Absolutely.
Can I interject?
Is it on cannabis or Prop S?
No, it has to do with business. Business.
Very quickly.
Okay.
We've spent a tremendous amount of time on this item.
So one of the things I found with the California Jobs Program is we were looking at different industry sectors and which ones were more profitable for cities from a revenue, and usually advanced manufacturing. It was related to more technology. So is there something complementary, I guess, in our plan?
This would all be found, and I guess that conversation should be had in the comprehensive economic development area, which you're welcome to join the economic development subcommittee at any time.
Ready to move to community development?
Please.
All right,
Who's
so
up
again,
first?
we're thinking about what we want to see in 24 months around community development. We can start anywhere.
I just have one quick thing that I'd like to add to that list. We all received an email about the Daily Ranch Master Plan, which looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, I believe. And so one thing I would like to add to this list is the exploration of updating the parks master plans.
The parks meaning Daily Ranch or parks in general?
Parks in general. I'm not saying we need to explore every single one, but if we identified one or two to work on.
Yeah. Why? What would you be hoping to accomplish with that?
Oh, I think there's so much opportunity, so much open space that could have something there to invite people from other communities to come here. And for our own residents to use.
That's currently not being utilized.
Correct. Like an archery range.
Thank you.
For reference, I think it was the Kit Carson master planner said that we could have a shooting range there. And I don't think the surrounding area would appreciate a shooting range there.
Yes. Sorry, you done?
I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, just to expand on that, and it's kind of something that we've talked about in the past, or what we just spoke about earlier, is just marketing to outside of Escondido. I think we've been doing really good with certain organizations here, that like the Cinco de Mayo, Independence Day, those kind of events that have been marketing outside of Escondido, and I think we just need to do a better job as a city to reach out to the surrounding areas.
Which is really about bringing more people into the city for community events.
Yes. That's it for me.
I support the public master plan and including El Caballo Park. I feel like they need some love too, and Daily Ranch. As far as events for support, I would like to have a process for being accessible to different groups and ensuring that there's a process for, if we do support nonprofits or groups, that there's a fair process that's accessible to a lot of the different. We have so many amazing organizations in the city. I would also say, so for one example that was brought up is Washington Park has this meeting space there, but it's never used unless you book it for a party. And the community says, why can't we use that space? Why can't we have meetings there? Why can't we do this? If our tax dollars paid for it, why isn't that acceptable to us? So I would just really say a process for community gathering spaces that are free to the community, because we already have. It's there, right? So finding a way to make it really accessible, and that kind of mitigates the increased fees that we had. So having a balance of both.
Related, when we're talking about city-sponsored events, et cetera, that just in general there, something that I'm not sure where to put that, but public transportation, I think it needs to be improved in order to be able to bring people in, because a lot of people want to come in to the city, but it's kind of hard to get to places in Escondido. So I want to throw it out there because I think that's something that is important, because it would have, and then the why is it would have a revenue impact for the city and for our residents. So I think that's something that I kind of want to just kind of throw out there.
Do you have something in mind specifically that you'd like to see in terms of improved public transport?
Well, yeah, I'd love to see the Sprinter come all the way down Grand and
Right.
stop right there, at least at Maple Plaza. I think that would be really good, because then they could just walk across here to the park, to our events, to our fairs, to all kinds of stuff. I've actually started a conversation with NCTD about that, but I'll just leave it at that. But yes, specifically, I think that's a very, very important thing that we should look into.
I think with me, because all those things I think we all agree on, but the more city-sponsored events kind of goes hand in hand with the arts and culture. So I think are so many different cultures here in Escondido that we're not highlighting them all. And I think maybe having an outreach to be able to invite those different cultures. You know, we have Cinco de Mayo, all those other things, but we have a very huge Laos community. We're going to be doing something with the local tribes, and just being able to be the hub of the, you know, just the history and the different cultures would be really good. So just maybe be more proactive in that way, and having different cultures participate, which again will draw people from outside of our community to come and enjoy what it is that we offer.
Okay.
Is there a comment or two?
But we're still under community development.
Correct.
I'd like to introduce the topic of the autism housing crisis that's going on in San Diego County and how we can be friendly to that under housing development. I think it would be amazing for us to have some autism housing in San Diego. I know we have lots of other problems, but this is a new topic and I've learned about it recently. So having, it doesn't have to be low income, but autism friendly housing is something we should look at. There is only one community in the county and it has a waiting list of 9,000 people.
Wow.
So I think this is something that can put us on the map in that community and throughout the county.
Is there one other comment?
I guess I'm offering a solution here. You're talking about events, bringing people for events. You're talking about marketing us as a destination. Something that we need to work on is wayfinding within our city. So when we get somebody to an event that's in Great Day Park, we manage to get them downtown and vice versa. We want to move them through the city. And you're right, the arts is one way to do that. But wayfinding is significant to this process.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Do we have time to do the extras?
I think so.
We have time for discussion.
Remember, we can, just something that I got inspired by Joe, Councilmember Garcia, about the transportation is, it wouldn't require the Sprinter to come over here, but it's, they're doing it in City Heights. It's a little shuttle car that takes you to the downtown, especially because in City Heights, for 2 years, they've been dealing with construction. And it's like hurting their businesses. So I think as our downtown changes and evolves, having ways for, and even going to the east side, because you know we got lots of businesses on the East Valley, of some kind of like little vehicle that takes people to those hard to reach, the last miles, or you know where the public transit won't take them, because that's kind of becoming something. I know they're piloting it in parts of the coast and then City Heights. So I think that's a very, something that more and more cities are going to be doing, and I think something that could definitely help us with the whole wayfinding, the arts and culture. Like these are the key cool points within our city. It could also be like I don't know, like a tour or something.
Is that during special events or generally overall?
It's like, I think they're doing it through like their downtown. So the one in City Heights is being run by the City Heights business development. So they have like a business district, and so it's kind of in partnership with that, and I think maybe some of the transit agencies. So just some cool stuff to like look at partnerships.
So this bridge
to your
is...
point, oh, sorry.
So,
can I just,
yeah.
I was just going to say that I totally forgot. Is this number 2 or number 3, exploring a business improvement district?
So thank you, Mayor, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Is one of the things that got left at the side when the costs came back, what the annual operating cost for that would be the city, because the city has to commit its current level of service and then additionally the assessment dollars associated with the properties. So it's a cost, but it was because there was a continual ongoing cost associated with it, we set it aside. So I'm hearing, bring that back to the conversation, the P-bid.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, regarding the little taxis, I'll just refer to that.
They have like names.
We've had, I think, an active, some kind of a discussion about that. Staff is looking at, so there's already movement regarding that. And thank you for making that connection because.
And you know what, NCTD, those conversations are happening there at the North County Transit District?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
not really. And actually, that's probably one good question to ask.
You might want to ask the mayor about Sandag's involvement in some of these.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think it's Sandag that's driving.
Okay.
Question about the business improvement district. What's the why there? What's that supposed to accomplish?
A lot of the issues that were just listed, and it creates a discrete reinvestment area in the footprint of that area. So you take the proceeds and you reinvest it. The property owners sit on the board, and then there's usually an operating group that runs the day-to-day actions of that PBID.
So it's about
improving circulation. That is the determination of the property owners, what exactly the investment is, but it presents them an opportunity to do a lot of things we're talking about, which could be advertising, it could be circulation elements. They prioritize that work.
And it creates a funding mechanism.
It creates a fund mechanism.
Yeah, that they can use that.
So that's a great example of, you know, if you're down to, which, you know, who isn't always down to making decisions about where to spend resources, where to invest time, it's a great example of one that might get you a lot of mileage towards a lot of the things that you've already named as being important.
We are asking Mayor why the bid, the business district, and then also just a question about that little vehicle, that if there's conversations happening at Sandag around something like that. I don't know if you.
You know, I know there's grant opportunities for flexible fleets and microtransit. I'm not sure if that's anything, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, city manager, but those kinds of things require quite a bit of staff time to apply for, and it hasn't exactly been set forth as a priority before.
It hasn't, and this would be the way to start generating that conversation.
But we approved those grants, I think, for Oceanside and a couple of other communities for, I can't remember if it was flexible fleets or I think it was microtransit. But yes, in essence, and I believe they're administered through NCTD, if I'm not mistaken.
We haven't been having really much discussion about that, other than flexible fleet and stuff like that.
And with the business improvement district, the why, you know, assuming property owners are on board with this, it's a chance to reinvest some money downtown to make a lot of the improvements that we have been discussing thus far.
Right. Okay, any further discussion about community development priorities? I didn't translate anything from there that you didn't speak to, so right now, increased youth programming is not reflected.
Say that one.
So if you didn't name it, what you want to see, it's up there, it didn't get pulled over.
Oh, I don't know about everybody else. I assumed that those were staying and we were adding to it.
That's what I assumed.
You've touched on every single one of them so far.
Okay.
With the exception of reduced illegal fireworks. But let's talk more about partnering with NGOs for more youth programming as a community development priority.
To get a little more specific.
Yeah, like what would you want to see? Mm-hmm.
In particular, Councilmember Garcia and I were approached by somebody looking to do soccer clinics, weekend soccer clinics pretty regularly in the city. And that would be one opportunity to partner with an NGO for youth programming.
Another thing regarding the NGO, I had a meeting with Y regarding some of the projects that they have that they're looking at and the usage of the property here. And I think that's some serious partnership going on there with the school districts. And if we can all partner together, I think we can have some very positive outcomes.
And the why being about?
After-school programs, water safety, saving lives, a number of things that some of our, even fire is very interested because they have a yearly water safety campaign, and this is something that the Y is wanting to work with.
It's also gang prevention.
Right.
So, yeah. And so, real quick, and I know a lot of our NGOs, they do crime prevention for youth, and I think we need to, that's preventative.
Compact.
Mm-hmm.
Compact, Esco Kiddos, a few other ones, so we gotta support them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we ready? ready for organizational capacity.
Good.
Can we add one more discussion there? Have the city manager discuss?
Throw his 1 minute in there also.
Yeah, because I'm sure he has at least a minute worth to want to say something.
When I look at organizational capacity, it looks like exactly what we need, and we may have not had the resources to address up until now. So for me, that
It is that.
is a pinpoint list.
Mhm.
I would defer to the city manager though.
I'll just say my bit, totally agree. We need a higher retention and we need to expand also on our maybe length of time of what we're looking, well, let me just leave it at that, because I'm going to get into the policy details, so that, 100% agree.
Support all of that, I guess, I don't know if this falls in there, but I'm gonna say because I'm thinking of it. We do, I don't know how to capture this, but I do know that we have several, we do have outreach events, and I would like to see capacity to troubleshoot double booking 2 community meetings at one time. So I think it's a perfect example is, well, we had 2 meetings in one event, but also we had a heat resiliency workshop last week at the same time as our council meeting, and I know, it would be nice not to kind of have that overlap, so, I don't know, I think, if I'm saying it, we've talked about it, the city manager and I have talked about it, but being able to ensure, we know what's happening, right, city-related events that, and communication so that there's no double booking of things like that,
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that's kind of what comes to mind on organizational capacity. It's just being able to
manage the actual
calendars
complex
and,
calendar.
and the outreach.
And the outreach
So that
component of
it makes sense.
Yeah, you called out police, fire, development services. I added public works because you named that as an important one. I'm also wondering, given the need for, or the desire for increased transparency, communication, coordination, if, that needs to be named as a priority area.
So I think I'm going to take my minute.
Go ahead.
So as I said at the beginning, there is, in organizations that are starving to death, which is what this organization was, what you start to do is collapse positions on each other. And that means that you have people who are actually pulling double load, and then they don't have time to communicate. And then you lose where you are in terms of the things that are covered in the matrix report. That's why one of the things that I've talked about with you all individually is one of the ways to make inroads, and this would cover certain areas of the safety program, and actually access to understanding how we do things or how we learn to do things differently, is to create in our capital improvement program, create a position that facilitates that conversation. What we've done in the past is go do that work of community engagement. And I will tell you, I love my engineers, but that's not what they were trained to do. And by doing that, you've collapsed the capacity and you cause the confusion. And we've done that time and time again in this organization. So we need to be able to staff up in key areas that are on the list, but in point of fact, we need to make strategic decisions to create capacity back in the organization. And one of this is to decouple what has collapsed over this period of time, right? So what would happen if I brought this person on board is they would begin a 12-month process around what our capital improvement program looked like, help communicate where there are chances for the public to engage, and actually shape how we get money out into the community and the community's interests are being addressed. At the same time, we're looking at safety measures and frequency at intersections. That's been one of the big, I'm going to use the word on purpose, collision points. Staff isn't doing a bad job when they're saying this is the highest risk area, but there's no capacity to address community need and the community's ability to put forward, this is a real problem in our neighborhood. But the statistics weren't demonstrating that it was as high a risk as other areas. And so these were put in opposition to each other. And the engineers trying to say, but we're making rational decisions. And by saying that, they're counteracting what the community's need is. We need to decouple those conversations, honor the community request, and at the same time look at the statistical basis for making decisions. And one of the quickest ways to get there is to actually illuminate and provide transparency to a process, but it's uncollapsing positions, right? So that's my one plea in this, is that we're not doing an organizational capacity is recognize we're asking too much of individuals, and we need to separate those responsibilities.
Right, it's not just about duplicating more positions.
Because that's what happened in this period of time over years and years and years, and we send the wrong person to do a job, even though they're completely competent in their job, and that's probably why they got sent out. They weren't equipped for the thing, and they don't have the ability to process and do the improvement process that comes with it. So that's going to be, I think, to achieve a lot of what we're talking about, I think is achievable, but it's about taking away overburdening individual staff members in this equation and creating a new dynamic under which we explore that. So that's my only addition that I would ask the council to consider is give us the latitude to be strategic to meet your other needs and expand organizational capacity.
In key functions.
In key functions. In key functions. Because communication is the one I hear time and time again.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's an ability to meet some of that need, but we need to restructure to do that and take it back to some of that and take that off people's plates and deposit it somewhere else for that communication function.
Absolutely.
Well, he knew exactly what I wanted to say, so I'm giving you my minute. I'm giving you my minute.
I think you took it.
But yeah, but I really,
Okay.
I do support the big thing is going to be bringing that person in to start that. So I think we really need to support that. But I don't have anything to add. That's very good.
I would just say regarding employee well-being and workplace culture, I think there's been a positive shift in the workplace culture here, and I'm excited to see that. The other thing that I would like to comment is on the employee well-being. The police department has been doing a pretty good job of making sure that within the department itself, among the rank and file, are that they feel cared for in their well-being, their emotional care, not only from the chaplains, but other services that are provided. And I don't know how much is that provided for employees in general, but I think that would be something that should explore.
Time for general discussion about that, interactive discussion about organizational capacity.
I think this one, if the group would agree, I think we've got that one pretty much nailed down.
You know, I am just gonna have one more little thing with the positive employee well-being. Giving them kudos goes such a long way. The whole thing about everybody wants to be seen, heard, understood, and appreciated. And so just being more, I don't know, making more of an effort to do that.
And we didn't put it up there, but I would like to add the proposal that, Sean was speaking of. Yeah. It's important.
No, absolutely. Yeah, are we all in agreement to Sean's request?
Yes, absolutely.
And although he went over 2 minutes, but yeah.
I gave him mine.
3 minutes. Okay.
Something came up as you were talking and now it's gone.
I think it's a priority.
Oh,
Yeah.
you talked before about customer service orientation being an important thing for, was it the business friendly?
Business friendly.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so is that something you want to capture along, like as a nuance of workplace culture?
I would appreciate that being a council stress point, because I think that opens up an opportunity for us and get us to be able to catch up, but also realize that that's our ultimate goal. I think, unfortunately, the culture, as I said, that was of starvation forced us to say no, and we need to change that to try to say yes as much as possible, but also say, well, that's great, maybe not now, but how's the process to do that in the future, right? So that no disappears from the vocabulary, and we're back into service for the public. And I need to spend some time catching up to put that capacity in. So that would be helpful for the city manager to get that recognized tonight.
You'd like that?
Yeah,
Is that on here now?
Yes.
Okay.
As
Can you read
a
that?
definer, it says, positive employee well-being and workplace culture with a community customer service orientation, get to a yes.
I'd say start with yes.
And that would be bringing someone in. Yes, I think it would be an outside.
Well,
Yeah.
as I've shared with the council, that's going to be us reserving time to do that work, but getting an outside help to actually facilitate it, because there's so much catching up to do at our processes. I mean, I'm sure the public can give me a long dissertation of how confusing it is to actually do a development project or do a simple, what should be simple, and we got to catch up. And we know that. We know that.
Yeah.
And noticing right there that number 4, we don't have like a 23 priority or something, but I would like to have some kind of a nutshell for that.
Well, I think that's the evolution we're in, because in 23, that wasn't our focus at that point.
That's what I'm saying, that now I think I'd like that we need something there that has a nutshell, as to help us guide us as we're moving through.
Yeah.
Right, that is kind of a glaring omission based on the 2023 conversation, because you were still in starvation mode. There was no ability to think about organizational capacity. Ready to move on to financial stewardship? Is that what I called it, stewardship? Yes. So what do you want to see in 24 months?
I don't know if this is getting into the particulars beyond what we're doing here, but we've talked about NGOs and nonprofits and things like that, but for financial stewardship, who outside of what we currently spend money on in the general plan, who do we give money to and why? What is the criteria? We have looking at city-sponsored events and partnering with NGOs and different nonprofits. So what defines who we give money to and why? So maybe policy around that. That's in addition to everything that's listed there, potentially.
And what are you trying to accomplish with that?
Financial stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
I think when somebody asks, why did we spend that money there, we should have a reasonable answer as to why. And a policy to point to for the council when it comes before us. Does this go in line with the priorities and the policy we set forth? Can't stress the implement energy road plan, or energy plan too. I know it's on there, but
That needs to be underlined. What does that look like in 2 years? Is that in implementation in 2 years?
Oh, it's an implementation. I think what I needed to hear is this tonight, so that I can bring back the financing proposals for consideration.
And what are you trying to accomplish with that energy roadmap?
Modernize our infrastructure and reduce our energy use.
And let's not forget, all right there, build reserves. We were able to weather some tough times because we had reserves. We need to rebuild those and to make sure that if other tough times come, we're ready to be able to take that on. So as we continue to work forward with Measure I's implementation, we need to make sure that that's not all spending, that there's some savings that need to go in there.
I like the increased transparency and communication with the public. We're serving the public, you know, and so just finding ways to, whether it's, I know the mayor's really good about, you know, getting on Facebook and Instagram and talking, but providing maybe more avenues on this is what we're doing, this is the direction we're going. Not to the same groups that we have now, but seeing how we can expand on that, because it seems that some of the feedback I've received is that the communication is not the best, and then people come up and listen to somebody else, and it's not always accurate. So I think if we improve communication and have it to come directly from us, there's less confusion, increased trust, and it encourages increased community input.
I would like to see the energy plan implemented. It's also cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a way to capture, you know, like I think of like our parks, you know, a fund that, like a maintenance fund, having like, so when we make decisions and approve projects, making sure we're capturing the impact of, you know, of projects and making sure that there's going to be a sustainable resource
Over
for that
time.
kind of, yeah, because I feel like that's kind of how we ended up. That's a big reason. I'm not going to, there's no one reason, but that is a contributing reason to our deficit issue, is that we didn't capture enough fees. We didn't have mechanisms in place to collect fees. Like I know some parts of the city will maintain, you know, the neighborhood where I grew up, there's lawn in the middle of the street. That's maintained by the city. That's not, you know, that was before it started getting put on the tax rolls of residents. So, you know, making sure that we're modernizing our mechanisms to be able to charge, to kind of anticipate fees so that we have the resources to maintain.
How would you capture that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you referring specifically to developer impact fees?
That's part of it, but it's also like parks, like, right? Like I think
those
about Washington
fees-
Park.
Those fees go, we're supposed to be collecting them for this very reason, aren't we? And
But we haven't always captured the correct amount.
So we're coming back on a
Historically.
no, I know,
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%.
We're coming back on a conversation about development impact fees.
Okay,
That is on
perfect.
the
Yeah.
horizon, which should address some of these.
Yeah,
these-
I'm not really
I'm
sure
with
what
you.
fund, yeah, but I think about Washington Park, how like, there isn't really anyone to clean up the park, which is a big reason why I do the cleanups, is because we don't really have staffing to do those kind of things.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of make it sustainable for if we do want to bring new assets and have more people use, you know, city property, how do we make it beautiful and clean for them, right? And
Absolutely.
so finding a way to have like funds for specific use. I also know, as an example, they, you know, not to get into the weeds, but there's something with Daily Ranch and there was supposed to be a fund to support them, and I don't know, that's a whole messy thing, but it just reminds me that to be intentional about funds and knowing how to like anticipate future costs, because there's a cost of building and creating the item, right? And then there's like the cost of maintaining it, and I think more conversation around maintaining.
So I think to answer your question, I think one of the things, we're not going to go through in detail, but that's part of the reason to give you this facility deferred maintenance list. As I said, the first 4 pages are so far, they're either beyond what we can do on a routine maintenance schedule, but that's a result of what you're talking about, council member. And then the last pages are things, if we increase staffing levels, that we could make inroads in, right? So I think it's there for you guys to start to look at. We were going to come back with a proposal in the budget to address some of those concerns.
Great.
Okay, how about,
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, I don't think we have.
Please proceed.
Thank you, I appreciate it. before, I think everyone's excited about Measure I, but we need to make sure that what our basic government functions are met, and not just met, but they exceed before we start looking at preferred projects. So when we're talking about, policing, fire, infrastructure, that needs to be 100% before we start looking at other things. That's number one. And then number two, talking about infrastructure, I do want to front load and be aggressive with the energy plan. I think the sooner we can do it, the quicker we can start saving, and then we could address those deferred maintenance as soon as possible. So I want to be very aggressive with that. That's it for me. Try and stick to the 1 minute that we agreed to, guys. Come on.
We haven't spoken to identifying the best use of surplus properties or Measure I implementation and oversight yet.
If I may, we have a presentation on Measure I oversight in a little bit as well. That'd be helpful.
On the agenda.
You're talking about surplus land? Is that what you were asking?
The surplus properties. Does that still feel like a priority?
So we are doing that, and I think we need to get a better understanding of the portfolio so council can make some decisions. So I'll give you a thumbnail sketch is that we own a variety of properties in the county, and that we're paying tax on those properties because we own them. And that may not be the best model to be out there owning properties with an undefined reason for ownership, and maybe we need to shed those properties off of our rolls, but we also need to have a conversation about what that means. So I think there is financial stability in those conversations because each property has ownership responsibilities associated with it too, right?
Anything else?
Did you two get a chance to speak?
I spoke earlier, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would too. I'm fine.
Okay.
So as you're thinking about the totality of what you've named, I think just a really quick conversation about blind spots or gaps. Thinking specifically about what are the kinds of things that there are contingencies, right, that need to be in place for these things to happen, or the kinds of things that could derail these things from being able to be successful, as a way of just gut checking that we're not missing anything important.
On the derailing, I think we're still suffering from that mentality of being so hungry, so needy and stuff, that we're trying to bite a lot of stuff, and because now we have a little bit. So I would say let's be careful that we focus on the attainable stuff first, and then that continues to grow and move forward. So I think that we have to make sure that regarding Measure I, I agree with Councilmember Garcia that it's about what the voters voted. That's where we need to start, and then continue to move from there. That's my 2 cents in regard to that.
I'm curious to see kind of what, based on all that we provided, what the city manager can be like, hey, kind of similar to this matrix that we saw, like what's doable, what's the low-hanging fruit, definitely, keeping in mind the priorities that our community has, right? But also small wins is really important. To see progress and kind of like, oh good, there's a movement. It builds just, it gives good energy for what we're trying to do and support and trust. I think really having the community trust us to make good decisions, but the monies that are, the additional revenue that we're gonna be getting. And then, you know, like I said, I think the city manager will be the one that will give us our reality check on what's doable and how long things will really take, and then which staff we have in place to maybe even start that. 'Cause some of these might have to require completely new staff. So,
Right.
you know, there's a lot to consider, right?
In
And I
terms
don't
of
know
like
what
the
that looks like yet.
scaffolding over time of how these things come together.
And I think with Measure I, with me, I heard, focusing on the things that are affordable, which is, it's good, but again, I don't want to lose focus on what's most important, that some things that are affordable might have to wait. And so making sure we keep the priorities set and being able to fund the things in the order of priority.
So it sounds like you need to get kind of clear on thinking like a impact effort kind of thing, or, urgency, but clear on what feels like it's the most important, how big of a lift the things are, because you probably want some balance of the most important things and also some early wins,
Yeah.
some low-hanging fruit.
I also think just keeping an eye on the future. During a recession, there's less tax revenue, and there's other times of prosperity, and making sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves. It's pretty clear. Escondido went through a time of significant prosperity, and then we got to this point where we've cut ourselves into nothing almost, and we don't want to go down that road again. So keeping an eye on the future, recognizing that the Measure I does sunset in 20 years. I know there's plenty of opportunity to renew it, but you don't know who's going to be on the city council in 20 years or what the voters are going to want in 20 years. So just keeping that end in sight.
Yeah, setting ourselves up for success without it. After 20.
And just another clarified question. Pretty much we've all agreed to everything here, but the one thing that we didn't talk about was the reduced illegal fireworks, and I forgot to mention it in my priorities, but it is a priority for me. So I wanted to speak now before it's forever forgotten. I feel like that's something, so there's room to do that, and it doesn't necessarily require a lot, so.
It was a high priority for your district.
Yeah, and just the city in general, I hear about it all the time, especially recently. And I meant to mention it, but I forgot.
Sorry, I just wanted you to articulate for you the why for that would be.
Because there's been a big increase within the since 2020 on fireworks, and it's something that happens all the time now, especially around the holidays. And I feel like it's something, it's lifted up to a very a community priority. And I know that I'm not the only one hearing about it, but
So it's about,
I'll give you a why.
Yeah.
The Palisades fire.
yeah.
That's why.
That's what I'm asking, as a nuisance,
Yes.
safety.
Yes, both, all of them. Safety, nuisance, PTSD, dogs running away. And we also, it's illegal and we don't do anything about it.
And having our cops running around.
So,
911 calls here, 911 calls there.
yeah, they take up, the lines.
Yeah, we'll take, if you two are done with this portion, we'll take public comment real quick.
I would say another why is, I know I hear a lot of fireworks where I live, and sometimes it's hard to differentiate between even possible gunfire and fireworks, so it's very scary.
True.
And just to add, I was wondering if we have that as a line item on the reported app, do we have illegal fireworks activity on the reported app? And could that be an easy fix to help us track it?
It's called report hit.
Reported app.
Since it was mentioned, I guess this could fall under financial stewardship to make things more efficient, but potentially updating the reported app.
Yeah, I was thinking that exact same thing. Sometimes to get it just to work.
Mine doesn't even work on my phone anymore.
Yeah.
I have to go online.
Yeah,
I think there are some improvements that could be made.
There's only fire hazards.
Yeah, we need to put that in there.
That's sort of.
That's it. Easy. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn to Sean and ask, Sean, do you feel like you have what you need for the next step of this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is helpful. I've gotten some specific direction of some places I can start to move immediately. And then we can start to get into this process of exactly what I think is the next step, which is, so what is possible? Because I think the challenge always will be, you can try to put, pipes are only built so big, and we're talking about how much we're trying to get through that pipe at any one time, and the danger is when you try to do too much, it explodes, but really, it can lead to inertia, right? I mean, if you overload any system, the system stops functioning, and so what the balance will be is still a conversation about how we're going to get to some of these priorities, and what is, back to what the mayor was talking about, you know, what does it mean to do a Prop S repeal in the midst of doing other things, and what are we going to, as long as council's willing to hear that and make those value decisions and think about alternatives, I think it's possible. The only other thing I would mention is tied into this is the places we don't really talk about because they're not forward-facing in sort of a public exchange. It's finance, information services, and my human resources team, right? Human resources may need to be addressed so they can expand hiring capacity, right? So those are the interrelationships that sometimes need to be adjusted to provide enough support to do other things, right? So that team is the architecture that supports going after this fun new or effective new IT solution. But if I don't have the resource to get that IT solution, then deployed in a way people learn about it, it threatens to be inert, right? And we've had, before I got here, there were a lot of examples of some decisions, and I won't comment on the reported app too much, but decisions made where it's not, it did something, but maybe it's not doing the full thing that the community needs or really engagement needs. But it's about providing the infrastructure to support these big ideas to get to the finish line.
Are we ready to move on to talking about roles and responsibilities related to Measure I Oversight Committee?
Yes.
So I do have a couple handouts just to stimulate the conversation. This is an example of the bylaws for the committee. You can test it. I was pulling one for myself. This is just an example of what Oceanside decided was the purpose of the oversight committee. And this is what they sort of, how they, and again, I think there's further conversations to be had here, but this is how they structured their reporting specifically on expenditure. That's how they report on the expenditures for their Measure X. Doesn't mean we have to do the things the same. I just wanted to give you an example of those two things.
So do we have an already articulated purpose of the oversight?
On the ordinance.
Yeah, I was going to say,
The ordinance
would you like me to go through the presentation? And that way you guys have some context.
Go ahead.
There you go. Cool. So, Honorable Mayor, City Council, just a quick review of the Oversight Committee. I'm just going to review Measure I, the committee itself, and potential next steps you could take. For Measure I, for those in the audience, and a refresher for the council, it's the ordinance that establishes a 1-cent sales tax with a 20-year sunset clause and includes a provision of a Citizens Oversight Committee to ensure accountability and transparent use of the funds. So the actual Oversight Committee, I just want to give you a refresher. The purpose in the ordinance is to ensure citizen participation, open discussion, and accountability, to ensure tax revenues align with the voter-approved measure. The actual committee composition, as you're aware, is that one comes from the Escondido Police Officer Association, one comes the Escondido Firefighters Association, one comes from San Diego County Taxpayer Association, and as an update for everyone, that member will be new now, given a recent resignation at the Taxpayer Association. It will not be Haney Hong. Then one is a business community member, one is at large, and one is an alternate. And those 3 appointments that are listed at the bottom, those ones are still pending. So we need to make a decision on that at some point. I leave it to your discretion, but if you would like to do so, we can schedule at your leisure. The appointment process, we went through open application, city council reviewed, you've already conducted the interviews. The members must remain residents of the city and have no conflicts of interest. As an update, current commissioners who serve on our boards and commissions are eligible to serve on this specific committee. Term length, 2 years. They can serve a consecutive 3-term length, can continue until a successor is appointed, and they fill the vacancies for unexpired terms. With respect to removal, absence of 2 consecutive meetings without excuse results in immediate termination. City council has authority to remove members with or without cause, so they serve at the pleasure of the city council. Meetings, it's currently structured to where they're only required to meet 2 times a year, so biannually. Majority constitutes a quorum. Meetings are open to the public, subject to a Brown Act, same way as our council meetings as well as our board and commission meetings. Now, the powers and duties outlined in the ordinance is an annual audit of revenue collection and use, provide audit report to the city council within 90 days after each fiscal year. City manager or designee provides administrative support as needed, and I can email this presentation to you as well, so you have a copy of it. Conclusion, Citizens Oversight Committee plays a critical role in ensuring the responsibility of the public funds. It ensures transparency and accountability and public trust in the city's revenue use. Now, potential next steps the council could take, it's really today setting the direction, and there's options with that. You can set the direction and expectations through either a guiding document, or you may recall when there was a measure placed on the electoral ballot in 2022 for a potential revenue increase. The city council adopted a resolution that provided guidelines for what the funds could be used for. That's one alternative. The next step would be to appoint the members that I referred to previously, business, at-large, and alternate, and then seat the committee, and hopefully they could be meeting as early as spring of 2025 to establish their chair and their vice chair and get their own bylaws in order. So that's an overview of the Citizens Oversight Committee. If you have any questions, let me know.
And what you're looking at is the bylaws, because any committee is going to need bylaws to understand how it operates. So this is just the first page, which was the inclusion. So the question is, are you going to have them generate the bylaws? Are you going to give them their bylaws? Those are some things that we need to sort through. If you go back to what they're directed to do, that is their full range of responsibilities and powers. And powers
As voted by the voters.
As voted by the voters.
Correct.
And you can see it is defined here, it's an audit function. Audit review of investments that have been generated.
So do they generate the audit report?
No, they will provide a response to those investments. Their audit report is not the official city audit.
Okay.
They're going to audit how the investments were spent. They'll look at the revenue measure, and they'll provide you commentary, because they don't actually have ability to change anything on how those investments take place.
So the report is just like a verbal report or findings at their meeting?
That you can either turn to them to craft their bylaws and what they're going to do, or as Zach said, you can give them some guidance on what you're expecting the bylaws to reflect. Those are the options that we need to understand. And before you made the choice, we wanted to make sure we actually had this conversation, so that you understood, so people understood what it was that they were getting involved in, because there were some conversations during the interview process that we're suggesting something else,
Yeah.
right? And so if you want something else, because as you see, I'm committed to providing staff support, so I'm trying to understand what that expectation on support is going to be. This seems fairly straightforward. We provide them with a report. They look at what the expenditures were versus what was the guidance document, and the report is whether they want you to consider something else or consider changes, or that they give you that this fits in within the space of the measures language.
And if I may just add to what Sean articulated, as it pertains to their bylaws, in the ordinance they are charged with actually completing their bylaws, but your guidance document or a resolution could really help inform what those bylaws look like. So, but they would ultimately have to approve them as a body, but you could definitely set the direction on it.
So if we're starting to outline kind of roles and responsibilities, I think I'm capturing this right. Check me. So the staff's job is to provide the oversight committee with a report of here's the revenue collected and here's how it was used. The oversight committee's job then is to look at Measure I and to look at that report and do an audit, essentially, of like, here's how those things line up, and to present that back to council.
Correct.
And again, just so everybody understands, and this might help the audience too, we've created a special tax district. So these funds will be coming in a special way, right? So they will be separated on the state level, so we will see them separately, they will be cataloged separately. And then council, a little bit what you're going to be doing the first year is you're going to be programming based on the revenue estimates. The way this works right now, they would then review the year's expenditures against that fund and then provide their audit report. That's how it's structured right now.
So staff is responsible for managing the funds and tracking them over time.
Yes, and that's why I provided you with, and again, this is a conversation that probably should go to the budget subcommittee and then to the council about how you want to track it. This is just a sample. It's not to say this is how they do it, but this is a sample of what Oceanside is doing right now.
So then the council's job in Measure I oversight is to decide how the funds get used?
Yes.
I just had a quick question on the audit methodology, because I've done audits, accounting audits, and is there a particular standard that you're kind of working to, or?
There is
not in the ordinance.
There's no standard. It is a simple, what I think they mean by audit is a review of those expenditures and being able to see where those expenditures went, right? They're not doing forensic auditing of that.
Correct. The last bullet point, the purpose of the committee, ensure tax revenues align with the voter-approved measures.
Yeah.
So there's language that was specific in the ballot measure.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So that's really what they're doing, is make sure it's in alignment.
Because I noticed D on, whose is this, Oceanside? Make a finding prior to any future renewal of the tax, just in essence, to make sure that the funds have been expended on improved infrastructure and improved public safety services. I'm assuming those are the two things that were on the ballot when it was passed? Okay. So, yeah, ensures that it aligns with the voter-approved measure, got it.
Yeah, and what we'll also have to demonstrate in our presentation is that we've done citizen participation. There's been open discussion about how to invest those funds. So that's what we'll have to demonstrate. A staff will have to come in and report to them.
Our tax is a general tax.
Just to clarify though,
yeah.
just to clarify, so where it says with the intent of Measure I was public safety services, similar to what occurred during the 2022 election cycle when we put a guiding document with a resolution to measure, what was that, Measure E. What the city of Oceanside did was provide a direction that they wanted those for public safety, but it was a general tax. So it was approved with a simple majority. It's not a special tax that required 2/3 majority support. So although it says they want public safety services consistent with the intent of Measure I, Measure X, my apologies, that was not a special tax in Oceanside. It was a general tax.
But this is a chance for you guys to consider what is your guidance, because that's what they're going to be auditing against, right? So you have a way to set again. Some of these are going to be later, right? You're still wrestling with some of the investment and the conversation, but we want you to keep this in mind as you're going through the process. And what are you going what are you going to lay out in front of them as they think about it? The only reason we're using this example is so you get an example of something that's out there, right? But here you need to pay attention to this, and these are going to be some things that they potentially can ask questions against. And staff has to do a presentation, but if there's further guidance that you want to give them, this is the opportunity to provide them some guidance. I'm not saying right here, right now, we need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, we could come back at a future time to actually approve anything at the council level.
And the one thing I wanted to point out is that one of the questions that the budget subcommittee is going to be wrestling with very, very soon is the accounting procedure, right? How are we going to start reporting out about revenue intake in this particular category, right? And so that serves some of the function, but the direction is, do you have any direction you want to give them while they set up their bylaws in preparation for that? And if we don't have an answer right now, we need to figure out a process, because we have to appoint them pretty soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're scheduling some time to facilitate that process.
Would it be a Brown Act violation to, since we don't have to answer this right here, right now, can everybody make recommendations, send them to Zach, and then the budget subcommittee can frame something from there?
The recommendations for how to use?
Totally, it's within the agenda right now to give direction to the Measure I subcommittee, so we could gather that information now. Now approving any sort of formal policy,
come back to
that would have to come back.
We definitely need to re-agendize.
But we would need to re-agendize, but we could do that. So this would be maybe the best form, otherwise we have to agendize a separate item.
That's what I was saying. I meant, email as the next few days go by. If
Give your
things come
thoughts.
to mind, can they email them to you to then be considered in the budget subcommittee?
And
Yeah.
yes, and I think Mike's question is a good clarifying question. Are you providing to Zach, here's how we think the Measure I funds should be used, or are we providing to Zach, here's the direction we want to give to
Here's the direction we want to give.
The Measure I oversight.
Sorry, I interrupted.
The oversight
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just one point of clarification when it comes to giving direction to the oversight committee. During the interview process, you may recall there was potential for individuals express maybe doing public outreach or things along those lines as part of their role. And as we see here, that could be one element of it, but it really serves an audit function. So if you were to give direction to the Citizens Oversight Committee, you'd want to determine whether or not they can form subcommittees or not. Because if they created a subcommittee format, it would be at the city manager's discretion because he has to allocate staff resources, but that would determine whether or not they could do outreach. Because if they're doing outreach, that would really have to go through a subcommittee as opposed to the full body. And that would be a determination for you to make, I think, at the outset. Otherwise, staff resources could be run thin on that.
Are there other things like that, Zach, that you want them to be thinking about? Like one direction that you should consider is whether to allow the subcommittee or the oversight committee to be getting input, or whether that's something the council is going to do. Is that right?
Yeah, so essentially if you're wanting the oversight committee to serve as a sounding board for the community to receive feedback and then bring it to the council, that would be the public outreach piece. Or if you're solely wanting them to look through the lens more of the audit function and how the funds need to line up with the voter approved measure. So those are kind of
So,
Mayor,
The-
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to wrap, because I know this is where we're ending, we're almost done, but I'm trying to wrap my head over what the request is. So I want to, maybe this will help me, I need to get out. I like the format of this budget. I feel like it matches what we submit. So I like this. I like the simplicity of this. And I don't know if that means we draft something very plain, bare bones, and they add or whatever to it. But I guess I'm not sure on this other piece about our guidelines. Can we go back to that other bullet point? The guiding document or setting direction expectations, that I feel like I don't know how to answer that right now.
Yeah.
And so, and I understand, that's why I think you want us to get more time so we can think about it,
Yes.
to give it to Zach.
That was my
But I
question.
want to make sure we're giving them something that's helpful, because I still don't even know, I feel like it's a homework assignment, but I don't know how to do the homework assignment.
Yes, so this question here of should they be the ones soliciting feedback or should you solicit the feedback is one thing to consider. What else?
So again, that's one of those interpretations, right? I think there's a reason you provide it. You can get competing interest sets, you can quickly the relationship can dissolve between the two entities, if they still need to, you need to demonstrate, go back to ensure, I'll break this down pretty bluntly, ensure participation, open discussion, and accountability.
Yeah.
I think that's the council's responsibility to justify that they've done that work to the committee and it's met a threshold that the committee finds acceptable. If you start doing competing, I've got to staff both, and then the answer may create tensions in of itself, right? What's curious to me is it says it only needs to meet twice a year. So it doesn't sound like the intent was you monthly meeting to report out, and it's very much pointing to the audit function. But I think they're going to need some direction, and frankly, I need some direction about how that is going to unfold so that it's clear to everybody roles and responsibilities.
Any other cities you can point to and give us some more of these to
Yeah, I
look
can-
at what they're doing?
Yeah, and there's other cities going through this very process right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have more samples.
Yeah.
Mayor, can I just jump in on the suggestion of perhaps giving information to the clerk in this subject? My recommendation would be to do that in an open session.
Okay.
That's fine.
Not doing that,
Yeah.
I just think, particularly because some of the things we talk about, including transparency and accountability in open session, those are the kind of things, and particularly as well, you can work off of each other as you begin to do that, and the open session is probably the best forum for that.
Then I think we come back to an open session with a few more of these, and that gives everybody else time to consider it, and then we can
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
go from there.
Can we, are there other things to flag, Zach, or other than how input is solicited and by whom that they should be thinking about?
That to me, I think, is the biggest issue because it gets to the heart of who is going to really be managing the funds and providing that input. And so I think that is why I think having an answer to the subcommittee question is essential on this, whether or not you want them to be able to form subcommittees or not. Because I think that would be the method that they would use for receiving feedback.
I think we need to provide some kind of a guiding document or a resolution. That's the homework. And so for me, it's a clear yes, we need to do that. We still don't know how or what in regard to that. And I think an open, just agendize the whole discussion, I think would be probably the best bet. And thank you, Mayor, for bringing up the issue to try to get a few more of these, because it'll help us get some clarity as to what we should include.
And in addition to that, can we find out if they have subcommittees and how they function? Because I don't see why we would, but I don't see why we would not.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Are there other uses for subcommittees other than soliciting
Yeah.
input of feedback?
I do like the idea of like agendizing it because I do get a lot of questions about the subcommittee and I don't know how to answer them. So I think the questions that we might get at that meeting might also help us provide clarity in that document, the guiding document, right? So I think having that be a public meeting where citizens can give input would help us clarify some.
Because we need to be careful that we're not setting up a mini city council.
Right.
Or, okay, we're gonna decide on this amount of millions of dollars, how this is gonna be spent, and you better spend it like this. So we really need to get some good clarity and some open discussion regarding that.
As well, if you're going to allow them to do subcommittees, you can say, we want those to be Brown Act, so they're publicly noticed as opposed to having side conversations that are not transparent. It's something to think about as you consider that.
And just one last question on this. This is more just a matter of timing. Does the council wish to make the appointments before or after the guiding document has been approved? Because
I believe I've not yet received everybody's recommendations, and I was really trying to take that into consideration. So, when can you get me some recommendations within a week?
Yes.
Okay, so as soon as possible.
And then if they get seated, the board would not start meeting until they receive the guiding document, would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. So next steps, Zach's gonna get a couple more examples to send those out, and then it's gonna be on your next.
Thank you, Zach, this was great.
I'll work with Sean, thank you. I'll work with Sean on agendizing.
Yeah.
And you'll send us the slides too.
I'll send it to you.
Okay. So we have one more agenda item to get to before we close, and that's really talking about, oh yeah, if we want to flip through those really quick. That's just to show you, when we talk about next steps, you can flip to that next picture. It's just to celebrate all of the work that staff have already put into trying to get their arms around what the non-negotiables are in their mind for the next 24 months, so that when you come to them with priorities, they have a head start already at figuring out, like, okay, what of these delivers on those priorities? What of these things aren't aligned? What could we possibly not do if it's not aligned, so that we can deliver on priorities? So it's a lot. You don't need to look through
That's
it.
our trying to get our hands around what's already in the queue.
Just wanted to name and appreciate the time and effort that staff are already putting into getting prepared to be more coordinated and aligned with your priorities.
Thank you, Steph.
Okay, staff.
So then here, you'll tell them, right?
Yes.
Okay, last conversation on the agenda is around communication challenges and naming perhaps some policies or processes that we need to dig into at a future time. If anything.
So the city manager has one right now. In a case of an emergency, I will say, no matter what form of government you have, there are three people that the city wants to hear from in an emergency. They want to hear from the two chiefs, and they want to hear from the mayor.
Yeah.
Right now, that's not well defined in our policy and procedure about who is in those states, who's a spokesperson for the city, right? I would recommend that the council really seriously entertain an adjustment of their policies. It doesn't mean the mayor's making a decision, but the mayor being in the front of that conversation, I think, is important, because people still don't know who I am and what I do. Even when I tell them the city manager, I tell them the job, right? So I think that in those moments, I would urge the council consider reforming its policies or adjusting its policies to create that opportunity. And then the deputy mayor would be the backstop if the mayor was out of town in those particular situations. It's just unclear how that works and who the spokesperson is. I'm just telling you that's my experience from some living through disasters. That's the expectation of the community. They want to hear from the mayor, right? And so it's not clear. I would like to see us advance that through. And there may be other things in the council policies that folks want to see looked at a second time, but right now we don't have a formal way except bringing the whole document in front of you all. This might be something for an ad hoc to look at and get some input in a public session, and then an ad hoc to look at, and then bring back some of those suggestions beyond this one. So that's one of my things that this policy document has been around for a while. It might be good to read the policy document and then have some conversation specifically about the rules and procedures the council works under. That might take a little work because it's a pretty thick document, but I think it's time as we shifted to look at that. And that's just one that I was pointing to that I think needs to be considered.
And not to be workshopped now, but just naming it as a possible.
And so if the council was interested in doing that, I would be looking to the mayor to set up an ad hoc that we could start working with to go through.
Is this the council rules or?
Yeah, the rules
the
rules and procedures.
Okay. Well, I will say, just when I have seen like crises, like mass shootings or something, there's a press conference, and there is usually the mayor and the chief and I've kind of always worried, like, it seems like we don't have those kind of mechanisms in place. So.
And I came from the school board where it was not written policy, but it was unwritten policy that the superintendent was the spokesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And I came here, and I'm always looking to Sean, so this would, but yet the community is coming straight to me. So
right.
I would appreciate some clarification on that too.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I see it on the news and I'm like, okay, I'm on council and I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I think we need to absolutely clarify that.
Sean, you're saying that's just one example?
That's just one example of some other things that are in that. That is absent from the policies and procedures.
What phrase or title would you have to capture this broader?
So it's reviewing the
To
council
put the
rules, right?
Council rules and procedures to modernize them and address gaps.
And that reminds me of another thing is, especially around the battery fire, is like an actual like proper briefing for the rest of the council during like big, because I felt like for that battery fire storage fire, like we should have all been briefed as well. Like I understand someone being the face and like answering questions from the media and all that kind of stuff, but also like us getting real time information, and I just felt like that was a gap. So I would also say like briefings on crisis, or if there's ever a fire or like a really devastating incident in our city, we should be briefed on that, because a lot of times I find out from the newspaper, right? Instead of us, and was like, I'm on the council, I don't even know this. So
we've never exercised. I've never seen it exercise emergency meetings where there's a 24-hour public meeting, right? And I think in cases like the fire, I think that would have been an opportune moment to do it. So I think we need to start, because there's three types of meetings. There's the standard one, there's the emergency, and what's the one that needs like 72 hours? It's the special meeting. So I think we need to exercise the emergency meetings.
All right.
The communication challenges, is this sort of in line with my request for a town hall and addressing that?
I think that's another issue right now. I think there would be good to, again, for maybe in the same way, because I just think it is in the policies and procedures, is how council wants to utilize resource, how they use rooms, what's the procedure. That's all a little more than a little ambiguous in that document, and I think it could really stand to be, again, so you are taking advantage of your position to be able to maybe hold a town hall, do communications, because I think that's another thing that's been stifled in this space as well. And I think we need to figure that out. But I need to figure out then what's the expectation, and then how do we manage that from a staff perspective, right? And I think it's a little bit unclear exactly what council wants to do, and I think just coming into a commonality around those things will help stimulate more community conversations, because you guys will have then access to that resource, right? So
is that something we want to name here?
Yeah, I think it fits in the
like
rules.
access, council member access to. I know, like I did a community conversation around youth violence, and it was, I found an outside space to meet in, but everyone's like, why aren't you having that meeting at the city, right? Those are, so there's like these really timely things that happen that, or maybe things that we're, passionate about in our districts, where our community wants to hear from us, and why aren't you hosting something like a community forum? So having like a fair process where we could use a community space, right, for, of course, council business and only that, but, so yeah, seeing what a policy like that would look like.
For sure.
And I would even volunteer myself to be on that ad hoc, just saying, putting it out there.
Ironically, I was going to ask you.
Thank you.
And what public spaces are available for that,
Yeah.
Because there's the police department that is underutilized, and a lot of.
I think there are several spaces that are underutilized.
Yeah,
Right?
Washington Park.
Washington Park is that
Full
was
house, that rec
pretty
center.
much my very first community meeting that I went to was there. So, yeah.
The room we're in?
This one, yeah.
Yeah.
Other communication challenges that it would be good to name if we're maybe revisiting the council rules more broadly?
This has come up in the past, and it would just be like when we do kind of an outreach, having like some type of like, again, I'm not trying to like get in the weeds of micromanaging staff in any way, but maybe having like a protocol. I know we have like participation plans around housing things, but like having some kind of a process for how things get advertised. So not like the day of or the day before, but maybe a couple times before, a general kind of practice of advance notification, is something, you know, I think
Of
regular.
what types of things?
You know, just when we promote events, sometimes we only like, we'll share it once. And people will like, oh, I just found out about it today, or, you know, oh, this is tomorrow, you know. They'll find out about it after the fact, so being like an earlier notification of things happening on our social media. I know, Mayor, you mentioned about social media. I feel like there's a lot of potential there. And even sharing things more than once or the day of, I think would encourage participation.
So, Mayor, would you call that like best practices?
Yes, best practices for communicating around like social media and like city events that we do, like meetings where we're gathering input, right?
We'd have to figure out where that would come from too, because are we gonna be adding more responsibility to one staff when we haven't?
Well, and again, you probably, I will say there's a reason behind everything, right? So if you want something, then I gotta figure out how to address it. So that's why I bring back the proposal to say, this is how we get more activity in that space, right? So you would still have, you would have to weigh that versus, but I can guarantee this is one of those spaces where other communities, they do set a high bar about that level of communication, but they're staffed appropriately, right? We may not be at that staffing level to provide that reoccurring notification, right?
Because that's needed, but the how right now.
And again, you tell me what you want, and then we'll figure out how we can get there in terms of that level.
I'd like to throw something up there, and I'm not even sure how to, I'll struggle through trying to put this together. I was at the police department, this was a long time ago, and the media wanted to interview me, and my immediate response was to turn to the chief and say, is it okay? Because as a chaplain, that's the way you're trained to be. You never speak unless the person in authority allows you. But then the reporter said something to me that was very interesting. He said, no, I'm interviewing you as a council member. And I said, oh yeah, that's true. And that's very different. So I wonder if we need some clarification as to what is it, when we speak, who are we speaking for? What are appropriate things for us to speak to? I'm struggling with this. I'm trying to figure out.
No, I think it's a legitimate question. And again, I think some of what's in the policies procedures dodges some of those more difficult questions. And so I think this would be an opportunity to get that surfaced and have a robust conversation about what is that moment, and is it okay for you all to follow, to do the interview, or do you want some other procedure in place? Right now, I think it's up to you, right? But that's something that you can discuss about how you want to handle those moments.
And for me, I mean, I'd say it now. For me, I think that, yeah, we should all be able to interview, period. But we should have some guidelines as to what.
Well, but providing that clarity and understanding that you all know that, right, helps, like, so it's not a surprise why somebody's speaking about this, right? You agree to allow yourselves that freedom to speak your heart and your mind in that moment, right?
And allow me to brief you too on potential consequences for speaking.
That's a
with
good one.
Very
I always
few
ask.
for me on a one-on-one often, but nevertheless, it's something I always feel strongly about. I don't stand in the way of you being able to give an interview, but I always like to make sure you know what happened and what the consequences are.
And I have used this resource quite a bit. You know, always making sure that.
So
But
we are,
anyway.
sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead.
We are very close to the time boundary, and it sounds like we haven't totally exhausted the things that could be addressed via a revision of the council rules. So how would you like to proceed?
Well, you would go to the next council meeting and
I'll
propose-
request a policy and procedure subcommittee.
Yeah.
And assign 2 council members.
Ad hoc.
Ad hoc.
It would be ad hoc.
And this would be a starting list, but maybe there's an opportunity for this list to be built upon as people are gestating on it. All right, next steps.
Go for it.
Sean.
Adjournment?
Well, we're gonna take this back to staff and take it against the work we already have and try to find pathways to meet this goal of what can we accomplish in the next 2 years. I've gotten some specific direction tonight that allows me to advance some of those immediately. But I think that's what we're trying to formulate is a work plan. And so I think once I've done this engagement with staff, with continuing with Michael and Robin, we'll make an evaluation about whether we need another one of these meetings or we'll do it in the council chambers. We'll try to figure that out when we have that next conversation on the staff side. Okay?
Great.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody.
One oral communication, just off agenda.
Okay.
And you guys have been grinding.
30 seconds. No, seriously, that's what I gave everybody else, just 30 seconds.
Oh, great. I learned a lot, and it's been a pleasure watching you guys interact with each other. And, we need to bring back a sense of community. I like the social media, that is key, streamlining things, the different cultures. What does it mean to be an American? That's a big question. When I say that, I mean, we all, let's just say, have our different opinions on things. But, we've got a lot of things to value. And I think if we step into our positions that we, are destined to demonstrate to the rest of the world, a lot of the problems are going to go away. And, I feel like I was only here a week ago. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Next agenda.
Anything else? This meeting
No reports?
is adjourned.
Sure.